change of landscapes outside the window, kaleidoscope of new faces, communication with a variety of people. This is the ride on a long-distance train. That's why a lot of people love traveling the road. But for Emily, it's a job. She is a conductor on such a train. And for her, the road is a separation from her young son, taking care of passengers and troubles. Sometimes problems, sleep deprivation, but pleasure too. Of course, the clatter of wheels sometimes brought sad thoughts about her son. She longed, thinking how he was growing up without her. Where to go if you could not get a good education because of early marriage? A decent job, close to home cannot find. From the marriage left only a son and pennies alimony. I have to live on something, as there is no one to rely on. The only soulmate is Trixie's sister, but she has enough problems of her own. So most of the help is moral. So I went to the railroad. It's a good salary, and you can always work part-time. And the work is interesting, not so hard. It's not like her mom had to lay ties. That was work. So the poor woman didn't live long enough to reach 50. And the work of a conductor is nothing compared to that. And problems, well, there are problems everywhere. That's what work is. Where can you go without it? In general, their whole family was connected with the railroad. Father was a machinist, too, all over the country. So he was rarely seen at home. Mother also considered her marriage a failure, whether there is a husband or not. But my sisters loved my father. His arrival was always a holiday, but he left early too. In fact, the failed marriage, of course, had done a lot of blood to Emily Tighe, and everything else was forgivable. But the fact that the house, which his own grandmother Emily bequeathed to Emily, sued, that's what he seriously failed. I mean, she thought she was going to have a place to live. And not just a house, but a plot of land with a vegetable garden and outbuildings. How much effort she put into it. How she loved this house and her grandmother and mother-in-law. God rest her soul, before her death she said, "I bequeath everything to you, Emily, to you and your Johnny. That bastard Greg won't get anything. He'll be wasted anyway. He's such a piece of junk. He's just like his father. You'd better chase him off while you're young. You'd need a good man, and you'd be all right." And so she did, writing a will for Emily soon after the death of Greg, whom she had long suspected of cheating, in the same house, and caught Emily with his mistress. So I decided to fulfill my grandmother's wishes. Break up. I could kick him out. But he didn't. He went with some documents and certificates to Sheikh, to prove that his grandmother, Annie Igorovna, was not in her last years, and Emily, almost with a knife to her throat, forced her grandmother to write such a will. That was my own grandmother, my late mother's mother. It is clear that she wanted to leave me the house, and this snake, while I was at work, abused my grandmother, so she forced her. And how much effort and money have I put into this house? My ex-wife only knows how to walk, so now Emily and her son had to rent an apartment, and that too without work and part-time jobs nowhere. And there was no hope to save up for some housing of their own, because you have to pay for rent and hire a nanny to look after your son while she was on a trip, not to mention the fact that you have to live on something. That's the way it is. On the next voyage, she immediately sensed that there would be trouble. At the station, a pregnant woman entered the carriage, and her husband saw her off. You look, as if something did not happen, she thought unhappily, seeing how the woman's husband drags and places the luggage. In parting, he admonished his wife. "Here you go, Stacy, a separate compartment. You'll have a smooth ride. Call me as soon as you get there. Say hello to everyone for me. And here are the presents, remember what's for whom. And call me right away, don't forget." And he didn't forget to address Emily. "My wife is pregnant, as you can see. Please, please be careful. I don't know what's going on. I'll be very grateful." And he slipped a few bills into his pocket. Thank you for that, of course. But it's the fact that Johnny's sending him out with a belly like that and no escort. He realizes that anything can happen. But he says, "Go on, dear. Say hello. And in case of what happens, who's to blame? The conductor. They'll remember that you paid for it. Oh, those men, you put your treasure in the car and goodbye and goodbye. And if you reproach them, they'll make big eyes, saying, 'What's the big deal? They used to give birth in the fields. You should try it yourself, at least in the field, at least in the forest.'" Emily thought unhappily, remembering and passing the courses of guides. But what courses were there? Just a few classes, one of which talked about first aid and childbirth, but few people listened. Everyone laughed more. And the teacher herself reassured, such cases are very rare. Besides, there is bound to be at least one doctor or nurse in your carriage or in a neighboring one. So let's hope that everything will be all right for you. Let's hope so, Emily decided. The train touched down, rolling along. She looked in on a particular passenger, offered coffee or tea, asked how she was doing and feeling. "Don't worry, everything is fine. I don't need anything yet, the woman smiled. The face was indeed calm. Nothing portended trouble. Emily, having calmed down, went about her business. But could one cause for concern be dismissed? The next station added to the strangeness. Emily saw an elderly man trying to board the train. He tried one carriage, no luck, and then he got to her. Not only was he without a ticket, but he was blind. Well, you can't let the blind go without an escort. It's like everyone's conspiring today, pregnant or disabled, she thought. Clothed, obviously not very well, but clearly not a vagrant. A clean, pleasant face, about 60 years old. I didn't have time to take a ticket, but I have money. I'll pay, he asked. Why are you alone? Emily asked. I don't have anyone to escort me. I haven't had time to hire anyone either. She couldn't refuse, so she let him in. And only then did she gasp. No seats. In one compartment there were, but there was a mother with 3 children, where they could not take another one, and even a blind one. The other compartments are not the same. Her partner took her aside. What are you doing, Emily? It's not enough that you have one pregnant woman who's about to give birth. You let this one in too. It was such a quiet flight. No drunks, no company. But no, you're just going to get in with your mercy. What if there's an inspection? Come on, if anything, blame it on me. I can't throw such a man off the train. And what a weather. Look, it's starting to rain again. Don't we have no conscience at all? How can an already unfortunate man freeze on the platform? But she quickly realized that the pregnant woman was traveling alone in the compartment, and here Grandpa is quiet, clean, calm, will sit in a corner. He can't see anything, but he won't be noticed. Let's go, she took him by the elbow. I'll make you comfortable. What station are you going to? Who are you going to? Grandpa named the destination, said that he was going to go on to his son. Why doesn't he see you off? Emily wondered. I'll meet you there, the passenger sighed. What's your name? Archie. You can just call me Uncle Erich, he grinned. His face was tense, suggesting he was blind as a result of some misfortune, not born that way. Emily peeked into the compartment at the pregnant woman. Hello again. Ellen, sorry. I didn't recognize your middle name. It should just be Ellen. What's the middle name? The passenger smiled again. I'm fine. Don't worry. The deadline hasn't come up yet. It's just that I have 2. So much for the big belly. Emily sighed to herself, but spoke of something else. I'm sorry, Ellen, we have this thing. And she explained the problem of a blind grandfather who simply had no place to put him. Why don't you take Archie as your traveling companion? Ellen was even nicer than she seemed. Yeah, sure, let him go. Do I mind? I don't think we'll be in each other's way. That's how well it all came together. They'll both get there without a problem. Matthew shouldn't worry. Grandpa's really nice. You can see he's intelligent. White, clean hands, thin fingers. Maybe he's a musician. They say blind people have good hearing, but I don't know what happened to him. It's not Emily's job to figure it out. The main thing is that she didn't take the sin on her soul, didn't leave the unfortunate man in trouble at the station. She would have suffered herself if she had refused. Everything was really quiet from then on, and in general in the carriage, and in the compartment where there were passengers, inspiring anxiety. Emily looked in on them, offered tea and snacks, but the lady had all her own, and the blind passenger politely refused everything, and indeed sat on the edge of the bunk, like a shadow. So at least have some sweet tea. Why sit like this? All right, I won't refuse tea, he replied, but that was the end of all his requests. There were no stops during the night, no problems or accidents either. And Emily was about to decide that she could take a nap when some frightened girl knocked on the compartment door. Oh, do you have a connection here? There is an uncle, blind, says that an ambulance is needed, or at least a doctor. Something's happened there, I didn't realize it was water. Emily had just realized what the water was. She found her partner, told him to radio the trainmaster and announce that a doctor was needed, and she herself rushed into the compartment to the pregnant woman and the blind man, inwardly lamenting. Oh, the problem is hard. You have to go to the station. You can't wait. She'll give birth. I wish there was a doctor or someone else. And the compartment moaned, clutching the corner of the pillows with her teeth. Ellen Archie soothed her. Don't be nervous. It doesn't happen that fast. Help will come. The main thing is to calm down and listen to me. Uncle Erich, I still have 2 weeks to walk. It hurts. Help. She looked hopefully at the guide who looked in. It's all right. They'll make an announcement now, find a doctor, and everything will be fine. How are you doing here? Are you having contractions or something? Yes, but I'm afraid we won't get to the station. "A quick labor," the man said softly, soothingly. "And in the meantime, get what you need ready. Clean underwear of some sort. There's a first aid kit, isn't there?" "I've got everything. I'll get it all right away." Emily marveled at Archie's calm, confident tone. He sounded like an experienced doctor might give orders, even if he'd been a professor 3 times before. What's the use of that now? The poor guy can't see, she thought, as she took what she needed. She returned to the compartment, where things, by all appearances, were already going to labor. Now someone will come," she said confusedly, as she watched Archie's sensitive hands examine the laboring woman. "Well, while we wait, you, Emily, sanitize your hands for both you and me. Not everyone here wants to wait," he said sternly, surprising the conductor again. "Open up, it's coming soon." Alone on his feet. "And how do you know? Are you a doctor?" asked the astonished Emily. "Yes, I used to be a surgeon, but I used to deliver babies too. Still had eyes though." "Let's try it blind. You'll have to be my eyes and hands." "Oh, Mommy, I don't know how to do anything." Emily was afraid, but she pulled herself together so she could do it. "The main thing is to listen to me." There was no doctor or anyone related to medicine in the whole train. And Emily, on shaky legs and drenched in sweat, had to deliver a baby for the first time in her life, and not a simple one. It was multi-layered. Later, Annie herself could not remember what and how she did, but there were 2 new people in the compartment, boys alive and well and screaming loudly. They were placed on the chest and belly of their mother, who, in a joyful voice, forgetting pain and fear, began to give thanks. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Emily, crying loudly and laughing with happiness and relief, sat down next to her, holding the babies. She loved them so much, as if she had given birth to them herself. "It's you 2 who are my saviors. I would have died without you. 2 Badger boys, I would have given them your names." "No, you wouldn't. A boy could be Emily too. So there will be Archie and Emily," the mother said in a weak, happy voice. "Oh, what am I if it hadn't been for Uncle Erich? I couldn't have done it. I had no idea what to do," Emily sobbed. "You're a good boy, Archie. Your eyes don't see, but your hands remember everything. You must have been a good doctor." "It's been a long time," the man sighed, also wiping away a tear. The door to the compartment opened ajar. The second conductor, without going in, asked, "Well, what's up there?" "Everybody's alive." "Who was born?" Alive. We have 2 boys." "Come in and see," Emily replied. "Come on, what's there to see?" "I was afraid to pick mine up anyway. I just came by to tell you we're pulling into the station and there's an ambulance waiting. They'll take you to the hospital right away." "I won't forget you. And my husband will thank you. I'll tell everyone how you saved me and my children." Helen hurried away. "Here's my cell phone. Don't lose it. Give me yours too." "Don't worry. We're interested in how your boys will grow up," too, Emily assured her. The young mother and her children were dropped off at the station and taken to the maternity hospital. Emily gathered Archie into her compartment and poured tea. "Yes, and adventures on the road," she said. "And really, if it hadn't been for you, it would have been a disaster for Ellen and her boys. As it is, they are all alive and well. God willing, they will grow up to be good people. We'll be here soon. I live in the same town. Will your son meet you?" "I want to meet him at the cemetery. He's dead. We had an accident. He's gone. I went blind. I wish I had died right away," too, the passenger replied, pounding his fist on his knee. "Oh, that's how it is. Well, if you had died, 3 more could have died today. But you see, you're alive, so you're needed. You survived here for a reason. Since we're going to the same city, my flight's ending. I'll take you to the cemetery. Okay? Don't you have any family at all?" Emily felt sorry for this elderly and apparently very nice man in such a difficult situation. "That's the thing. No one. I used to be fine. Now I wasn't just a good doctor. I had my own clinic. I was making money. I did something stupid. I married a young woman. My wife is Wolin's mother. Our son died a long time ago, and then this happened to us. Wolin was gone. I was between life and death for a long time, and then it turned out I wouldn't be able to see anymore. And while I was in that state, Yuji took over the clinic, and somehow she turned it around so that she turned all the people against me. Don't ask. I don't know how. So now all I have left is my son's grave, so I went to see him. And then, well, yes, there are people there," maybe Archie said calmly, as if he'd been through something long ago. "What's the matter with you?" "I don't know what you're up to, but you can't do that." Emily didn't know how to comfort her new acquaintance. but she realized that he was really going through a hard time. "Why don't you stay at my place for a while? Go to the cemetery, stay a while, and then we'll see. We still need to know how ours are doing. Their mom's good, Vincent, and it's good that she met you. You'd make a good medic, by the way. And don't worry, I'm not going to end my life. At least not in a way that's going to upset or scare or set anyone up. I don't listen to what I'm saying." Once in town, Emily took Archie to her place, introduced him to her son, and soon they were driving to the cemetery. On the way, he talked about Voland, who also became a doctor, worked in the clinic of his father, and gave great hopes. What a pity. He probably would have saved a lot of lives, too, Emily sighed. Yes, he followed in my footsteps, but the path was shorter, and the worst thing is that in his personal life, I think he repeated my failures in many ways, Archie sighed. He didn't get married in time, though something was going to happen, and even more than once. He wasn't young anymore, but he was secretive. I only introduced him to my first girl. It was right after high school. My mother and I were against early marriage, but they didn't really want to be together without us. They split up. I don't know why. It was the same for me. I split up with my first sweetheart, with my wife Voland's mom. I lived like that, out of obligation, for my son's sake, and so that I wouldn't be alone. Then she died, and I got involved with that old fool Eugenie, and I was alone. That's what I should do. The cemetery, of course. Emily helped Archie find the grave. She led him to a bench. "I'll be out of your way. You sit here and talk to him, and I'll be right over here. When you get up, we'll go," she said. "Thank you, Vincent. What would I do without you?" "I don't know," Archie answered. Emily stepped back and wandered between the graves, reading the inscriptions on the monuments and wiping away tears. She felt sorry for the lonely old man. Pity for those who lay beneath the ground, and for those who left inscriptions on the stone to testify to their grief. Glancing from time to time at Archie's slumped form, she suddenly noticed that a boy, small like her son, was coming up behind him. Well, that is, about 6 or 7 years old. In his hands he held an inexpensive bunch of artificial flowers. The man must have heard his footsteps and looked back. Emily also hurriedly approached and heard the conversation. "Who is here?" Grandfather asked. "No, I'm Erich," said the boy. "I just came to visit the grave." "That's right. That's my dad." "Who's that?" Archie put his hand on the monument. "Yeah, that's what my mom told me. We used to come here together. Can't you see it at all?" "Did you come to see him too?" the little boy asked with childish curiosity. "I am his daddy. Where's your mom, and who is she?" "What's her name?" "My mom's name is Maggie, but she's in jail now, and I was in an orphanage and escaped. And since you're my daddy's daddy, that makes you my grandfather. Why don't you take me out of the orphanage? I can live with you and help you." Tears were ringing in the child's voice. Emily, her heart breaking with pity at the scene, came closer and asked, "What's going on here, Vincent?" "I don't know. I think I found my grandson," Archie replied. "Maggie. Yeah, I remember my son had a girl like that, but I never saw her. All I heard was them talking on the phone. And then I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to make sense of it all. Is it really true? What am I supposed to do with all this?" Archie was confused. Emily was, too. She shifted her gaze from the boy to the photograph of the dead young man and saw that there was a resemblance, but it would be premature to draw any conclusions from that alone. And anyway, what could be done with all this? "So well, friends, let's go home and tell each other all about it. And I'm getting a little cold standing here too." "You're not dressed for the weather," Erich said. "Emily. I ran away from the orphanage in the summer." "They didn't give me a jacket then," the boy said cheerfully. "Was it that bad in the orphanage? Did they insult you? Everyone cares about you. Now you'd stay warm and go to school," Emily wondered. "It's bad. I don't want to live there. I don't go to school. I can't go. I already know a lot, and I can count as much as I want, and read, and in general. But I don't want to go to the orphanage. It's disgusting." Erich frowned and turned the conversation away. "Grandfather, how do you go if you can't see?" "Well, I do not sit all day. I have a cane, see? I know where I can step, and where I shouldn't. And now Aunt Emily's still around. Aunt Emily doesn't have enough to worry about. Now she's got you." Emily thought, who really had little idea how she would be with her grandfather and grandson. She has to go on trips. And where would those go? The boy to the orphanage, so he'll run away again. The grandfather, even if it is possible to prove that they are related people. The guardianship, of course, will not give. He himself needs a guardian. In short, she takes on an impossible burden. But but at least a few days will stay. She'll dress them up. She has extra clothes. The boy seemed to guess her thoughts, and as they approached the house, he tugged at her sleeve. Aunt Emily, will you help me and Grandpa? I'd like to live with him. I'll try, buddy. I just don't know what I can do, she said. Archie understood her concern, too. He sighed heavily, realizing that there was little he could do to help a lonely woman with a lot of problems of her own. At home, Emily introduced the boys, sat the guests at the table, fed them. She listened to the guest's story about being an orphan. My mom and I had a good life. I'm telling you the truth. We had a nice apartment. I even had my own room, and my mom had her own. She worked and got money, and we had everything. And then some people came. My mom said they were liars. They took the apartment and said something about my mom, that she was a criminal. So they took her away. And when we said goodbye, she promised she'd come back and that I'd wait for her. She also told me not to believe she was a criminal. That's it. And when was that, Erich? Emily asked. I don't remember much. I was 4 years old, and now I'm 6. So you remember your daddy then? Archie asked. Not well. He used to come over and give us toys, and then my mom told me he was dead. We used to go to the cemetery with her. I remembered. Yes, the boy's memory was not bad, but in legal matters, what could he understand even now, even 2 years ago? Emily sighed heavily. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this. Do you remember your address? Erich. I would go there. Ask something. How? Oh, there's no point, Archie replied. The new owners must have the apartment. That's all it is, black realtors. I should know better than to know I'd been ripped off by one of those guys. Maggie, too. I don't know why Wolin never told me anything about her and her son. Only Maggie herself can tell me that the old man pondered. You'll get my mom out of jail. It's really not her fault. Honestly, tears welled up in Erich's eyes. We understand. Baby Emily stroked his head. I'm going to go look at the apartment. See if I can find out anything from the neighbors. I think we should go to other people, Archie said firmly. Ellen, this is the woman who gave birth. She said she was grateful that her husband would always help her. I don't like to ask for gratitude, and I don't like to demand gratitude for services rendered, but this is a special case. Do you think there's anything he can do to help? Emily asked. I have no idea. But we don't even know what kind of person he is, where he works. Maybe just a rich businessman. But we don't need the money. Well, maybe he's influential in some areas. Can he at least help us find out how Maggie got locked up and what happened to the apartment? Or at least tell us who to go to? Is there anything we can do on our own? What are we now? We're nobody. So, do you still have the phone numbers Ellen gave you? All right, let's call her, tell her what our problems are. Emily dialed Ellen's number, but the phone was silent. Well, obviously she's still in the hospital with 2 babies. No conversation at all. Only in the evening did she manage to contact her casual acquaintance, on whom she had pinned so much hope, only to be completely disappointed. It's okay, Ellen said in a sad, downcast tone. The kids are fine. So am I, but I'm thinking of divorcing my husband. Why? Why all of a sudden? I thought things were going well between you two. Oh, it wasn't fine. Is it good when a husband sends his pregnant wife on a train? I've been thinking about it here at the hospital. Why did he do that? Didn't he realize that I might die? That the children might not survive? Lucky you and Archie were there. What if I hadn't? Is that what you think now? Is he sitting next to me, begging for forgiveness or something? No, he hasn't even been here once. He's got things to do, you see. So I told him, mind your own business and I'll mind my own. And she cried. But why so wide open? Emily tried to reason with her. There must be an explanation for everything. He has a million explanations, but it doesn't make me feel any better. And anyway, we had a fight. I told him I was going to name the kids after you, and he didn't want to do it. He said he wanted to name them after our fathers, Igor and Victor. And he said it was wrong to name a boy after a girl. She's probably right about that. Archie has a grandson named Erich after him. Maybe they'll name a granddaughter after me. I can't fight with my husband over something like that.
Yes, you laugh. But Ellen was very serious and was not going to make up with her husband.
So it was even awkward to address her with her requests in such a case. Well then, that hope is gone, Emily realized. Since this husband was no longer in Ellen's life, he was hardly going to help us. And why should he? It's not like it's just some sum of money. The next day, seeing no other way out, she went to the address that Erich had given her, to his former apartment. Emily didn't know what she wanted to find there. Emily just wanted to look into the eyes of the people who had taken away the only place to live from a single mother and her son, and who were probably responsible for her imprisonment. She hoped to learn at least some details that might help with Maggie's release. After all, if she had to ask for help from powerful people, it was better to know the ins and outs of the case. Should I talk to the neighbors or something? She thought. But what she found out was completely unexpected. The door to the apartment was opened at her call by none other than Greg, her ex-husband. "Emily? Is this where you found me?" he said with a mocking smile. "What do you want from me now? Is the alimony too low again? Or what? What are you doing in this apartment? How did you get in here?" "I got here the right way. I walked in the door, and now this is my apartment. I sold my grandmother's house. You know, I don't want to be in the garden. Now I'm a city dweller. What do you want from me? I need to know how you got this apartment. You took the house from me and my son, and now another woman has it, and you put her in jail. How did you do it? Why do you want to know?" As an exchange of experience, tired of serving tea and coffee to passengers and dirty laundry for the third time to sell people, her ex-husband continued to mock her. This and the other woman should not flap their ears. Think about themselves and their child. Now let her sit, think. And a little such is not harmful. I may be tired of being a conductor, but I've never framed other people, and I never will. And I didn't set you up. But it wouldn't hurt to bring her out in the open. Remember that. Emily turned around and left, not really knowing how she could fulfill her threat. Of course, you could report it to the police, but while they're sorting it out. With such sad news, Emily went home, thinking about what to do next, and on whom she would leave the blind grandfather and his little grandson, while she herself will be on a voyage. If she asked for a nanny, she'd ask for twice as much money, which she didn't have. And if she called Trixie's sister, she'd probably refuse to do her own thing, too. There was still hope that Archie would think of something. After all, he hadn't always just been a blind invalid. He'd worked in a clinic once, probably saved someone's life. He must have had some acquaintances who may have heard some bad things about him, but they'd still remember him as someone who'd helped. But she had no time to tell the news at home. As soon as Emily entered the room, there was a phone call from Ellen. This time, she was much more cheerful. "Emily, hello. Excuse me, please. You called last time, probably to say something, and I started complaining to you instead. But you're not angry, are you?" "Of course I'm not angry, Eleanor, but I understand your problems have been solved. You and your husband are reconciled," Emily rejoiced. "We have. He explained everything to me. Turns out he was building a house, and he decided to finish it completely so that I and the children could move there from the maternity hospital. So now we're in a new house. You could call it a palace. Vincent's with me right now. He'll talk to you. He wants to thank you and Archie too. He's with you. Yeah, our doctor's here. There's a man on the phone." "Hello, Emily, this is Vincent Timofeyevich. Can I call you Vincent?" "I'm the husband. Ellen told me everything. I can't tell you how grateful I am. The doctors at the hospital said it went exceptionally well. Even they couldn't have done better. You have really good hands, and that Archie too."
Oh no. We couldn't leave a woman without help, but all the credit goes to him. He's the doctor. I'm just an assistant. He told me what to do, and I listened to him, Emily explained.
"And you did a wonderful job helping my babies come into the world. Thank you so much. I'd really like to meet you both and see if there's anything you need. You know, you can't let something like that go unappreciated. I was just calling. I'm sorry. But that's exactly why," Emily said, struggling to find the words. "You see, we need help, not money, not material help. I'd like to ask if there are any good lawyers among your acquaintances. Maybe lawyers or, I don't know, someone else, because Archie and his grandson are in serious trouble. Of course, I'll find you any kind of professional help you need, free of charge. Don't worry about that," Ellen's husband assured her seriously. "But it is necessary to meet to find out more about what is bothering you." Emily gave her address and told him when she could be at home. "And Archie's staying with me now, too. So we're all here. Oh, and my wife told me she wanted to name the kids after you. And don't even think about it. What's the big deal? Don't worry about it. I think Ellen's changed her mind, too." Vincent arrived the same evening with a lawyer. He listened to the whole story of both the boy and Archie. Apparently, the boy's mother was victimized by the same con artists we've been looking for. Now we'll have something to go on. Don't worry, they'll be held accountable for what they've done. I just wish we could figure out why Maggie went to juvie. I don't think she really did anything wrong. We'll figure that out, too. Once we've started, we've got to keep going. Don't worry. It's a complicated case, but we'll solve it because there are plenty of victims out there. You're saying your ex-husband was involved? The lawyer was asking around. He was. He also took away the house from me and my son, which our grandmother bequeathed to us. It was obviously illegal, but I couldn't prove anything. I don't know enough, and I don't have any connections. And he brought in some man, apparently with an education. So my son and I were left without a roof over our heads. By the way, my son needs to go to school and to the clinic. Do not worry. Everything will be done according to the law, said the lawyer. And the case began. An additional investigation was launched into why a woman with a young child had her apartment taken away and why she had been convicted. And this time the law was on the side of the deceived. Emily's ex-husband was on trial. Of course, the house could not be returned. It has long been sold, but she was able to get the money for it. But Erich and his mom got their apartment back. And Maggie herself was also released from prison. After a review of the case, it turned out that her accusation was completely false, and soon the happy mother was already hugging her son and thanking Emily and her father-in-law. How could it be, Maggie? Archie asked. And why didn't I know anything about you or Erich? Volan and I had a fight. It was a silly excuse, of course, but it couldn't be helped. It was a big fight, so we broke up. It was my fault, too. I loved him, but I couldn't help myself. I was so worried about it. And then I found out that Volan had died. But even then, it was too late to contact you. Besides, I was embarrassed. You were a serious man then, a rich owner of a clinic. I had no education, no profession. I thought I'd come to you after Volan's death and you'd just kick me out. You'd think I was some kind of fraud, but I'm not. The son is really his. I almost left Erich an orphan because of some stupidity. Archie said reproachfully. What's wrong with your arm? He gently felt his sister-in-law's elbow. Yes, I worked at a sawmill in prison. I made a big mess of it. At first I thought it was nothing and there was no one to treat it, but when I turned to them, they said it would be fine. Anyway, my arm doesn't hurt much. It just can't bend all the way, she said. Probably surgery can be done and everything will not be so difficult, said the former doctor. I don't really care about my arm or anything else. The main thing is that I'm home, that Erich is with me, and we have a place to live. Maybe you'll move in with us. Please, Archie. You're the closest thing we have to family now. Oh, this is awkward. There's not much choice, though, Grandpa said. There's nowhere to live. All I have left after my wife's shenanigans is a room in a communal apartment. It's almost impossible to live there. The neighbors won't let me. And isn't your lawyer, who solved my case so cleverly, will not help? How can you be so traumatized and left with nothing? I don't know, Maggie. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's the last thing on my mind today. I'm happy. I've got my grandson, I've got you. And if you can find a corner in your apartment, that'd be great. And I won't be redundant. That's for sure. I think I'll find a job, and you'll be very useful to us. Look after my grandson. Look, Archie grinned. Oh, I'm sorry, it's just a habit. I mean, at least you'll be around. It's like a child without supervision. Well, Maggie was embarrassed. Erich and I are real friends now, Archie reassured her.
And with us, too, with me and Gianni, Emily reminded him.
We're not blood relatives, but we're not strangers to each other. And you, Maggie, if you're looking for a job, why don't you come to us as a conductor? We need people all the time. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it's good money. I'd love to. You know, I've been in this damn prison so much. It'd do me good to travel now. That's good, of course. But I tell you, Emily, you'd make a great medic, said Archie. Oh, I wouldn't be a medic. Not unless you're always there to tell me what to do. But in general, I listen to you. I read books on first aid. I don't have time to learn much, but in case of emergency, I won't sit idly by when someone helps me with something. I can do a lot of things myself. Things happen on the road. But before Maggie could get a job, she had to sort out her hand. She was referred for surgery. But it was more complicated than first thought. She stayed in the hospital a little longer than she expected. Emily visited her, and one day, to her amazement, saw on the nightstand a picture of her father next to a woman and a little girl on his lap. Who are those people? She asked. Where did you get that picture? How could I? It's me as a little girl. Didn't you recognize me? Those are my parents, Maggie replied. They're dead now, but I always carry the picture with me. That can't be. That's my father, Emily exclaimed. And when you were born, it turned out there wasn't that much difference in their ages. Maggie had always lived in this town. Emily grew up in the country. I have an older sister, Trixie, also his daughter. I don't see how it could be that he's yours and ours, Emily wondered. It's very simple, I think, said Maggie. He worked on the railroad and traveled all the time. He must have been staying at your place or ours for 2 families. It happens. Yeah, I'll say. That's our daddy, and I never knew it. My mom must have known. I've heard them fight about it. Sometimes Emily remembered. Well, you see, mine used to resent him for coming so seldom and for being away so long. I wonder, Maggie wondered. So suddenly it turned out that they really are sisters by father. Maggie met Trixie, her husband and 2 children, so it was quite a family. Meanwhile, the fate of Archie and Erich was decided. They were able to prove their kinship, and the grandfather settled Lucy at his failed daughter-in-law. Nor was the acquaintance of Helen and Vincent and their sons Vidi and Gorko, with whose help they came into the world, interrupted. It was interesting to watch the little ones grow up. The mutual appreciation of the adults made it hard to forget each other. Maggie recovered, got a job as a conductor, and they began to travel together with Emily. They became real sisters, and when they finished their business, often told each other about their fates. They both had much to share. They also had something to complain to their family. Maggie had never had any sisters, and Emily and Trixie didn't see each other as often as they would have liked in their spare time. Emily had finished her home nursing course, after all, and was now considered prepared for the unexpected that could happen on the road. On one of the flights, a company of businessmen became passengers. Emily didn't like it right away. Always with this public, some kind of trouble happens. They complain about something without any reason, or demand something. I guess they compare the train to their own office. But what can you do? You can't just drop them off. This time it was not without difficulties. At first the businessmen behaved quite calmly, young and decent people. It is obvious that they are well-to-do and not in need of anything. They refused tea and closed themselves in their compartment, solving some questions. Suddenly one of them burst into the compartment of the conductor. "Girl, I need a doctor urgently. Do you have any doctors on the train? There's a man in there feeling bad, suffocating. I don't know. We'll have to make an announcement." "What's wrong?" Emily asked. "Who cares what? You're not a doctor, are you?" The passenger became indignant. "I'm not a doctor, but I can administer first aid." She firmly pushed the petitioner away. Taking the first aid kit, she hurried to his compartment. "They'll call a doctor right away. Don't worry." "I don't know what's wrong with him." He drank some medicine, suddenly entering the compartment. Emily noticed the serious swelling on the young man's face and quickly realized everything. Anaphylactic shock. An allergy, apparently. "What's the drug?" "Where did he get it?" she asked, preparing a syringe.
Wherever he needed it, where he got it, the doctor found it. "What are you going to inject him with? I'm telling you to call an ambulance," scandalized the victim's companion.
"Please calm down. My partner has already called everyone, and I know what to do." Emily quickly administered an injection and gave the injured man the necessary first aid. The passenger was rescued and regained consciousness rather quickly. "Thank you, Savior," he said as he shook Emily's hand. "That's a little something like that. I'll pay you for it, and I'll pay you back too. Chuck, you're the one who slipped me this." He turned to his partner.
"What did I slip you?" "You took something yourself. I don't know if you can or can't. You like to blame others."
Yeah, the story was almost criminal. His partner, a competitor of the businessman, gave him headache medicine that he couldn't take. What did he know? Well, he also knew that an allergic reaction can kill you, and that might well have happened if Emily hadn't been there. "Thank you. You just saved me." The injured man shook her hand. "So are you a doctor too, or what?" No, I'm a conductor, but I graduated from nursing school, so I know roughly what happened to you." "It's no big deal, really. It's really good that I happened to be around," Emily said, putting the medication away. "You just see your doctor. He'll help you out. I don't think you'll need anything else, though." "I know, it's happened to me before. Allergies are a scary thing, really, and the one who triggered it, Chuck, you might say, is a companion, but really a competitor. Apparently that's how he wants to eliminate me." "Can you give a reference as to what caused all this to happen?" the man asked.
"How can I give it if I'm not a doctor?" Emily replied. "I can testify, of course. Are you going to sue him, though?"
"I don't know yet. I actually want to break up with him. I mean, kick him out before some more serious trouble happens, although it wouldn't hurt to punish him for that sort of thing. It's a hell of a way to go. I don't want to get involved, of course, but it wouldn't hurt to tell everyone what Chuck's done. Let everyone be careful with him. Well, that's right. I won't argue. People like that are generally best kept away. They talk some more. Emily noticed that the passenger's condition had stabilized and went about her business. When the businessman was getting ready to get off at his station, he approached her again, bade her farewell, offered her money for her help, but as she, of course, declined, and even felt a little hurt by such an offer. Although she liked this young man, she did not think at all that their acquaintance would continue. For the next few days, she was thoughtful and distracted, and Maggie, who worked with her, was even surprised. I don't recognize you. Always so cheerful, so active, and now you're walking around like you're in the water, her sister told her. I don't know what's wrong with me. You know, after Greg and I broke up, I didn't really pay much attention to anyone. Well, it's not like I'm still in love with the ex. No, it's not. I even hate him after the shit Jennifer did to us. But I don't really like or trust other men either. I don't even like these road trips. They don't do any good. I've seen all sorts of things. You know, there are such conductors, and among ours, too, who on every voyage choose some man and imagine it's love. I'll never do that, Emily tried to explain her mood. And I'm not going to either. And anyway, you have to separate work and personal life. Otherwise, take our father, for example. How do we know if he only lied to our moms or if he lied somewhere else along the way? There are families with kids. I just don't understand what you're saying. Did you fall in love with someone? Maggie wondered. Oh, I don't know myself. There's this guy, but I can't figure out what it is. I think about him all the time. And he got off at his station, and that's all. I don't even know where he lives, if I can meet him. Well, at least a glimpse of him. And so sad about it, Emily admitted. But I'm definitely in love. But that's a good thing, Vincent. I'd love to be in love too, but I just can't seem to do it, Maggie sighed. Strangely enough, as she finished her shift and stepped off the train, Emily saw Hercule with a bouquet of flowers. He noticed her too and walked over. Found out when you were finishing work and thought I'd meet you and thank you. You don't have to. Thank you for the beautiful flowers, though. It's been a while since anyone's given them. Emily brightened. You're not married. No, divorced, and I have a child. He's 6, admitted Emily, who had no intention of hiding anything. You must be very tired. Hurry home to your son. I won't keep you, but I'll walk you home, and let's meet tomorrow. I'll invite you to a restaurant or anywhere else you want to go. It was obvious that he was a little shy, but he spoke sincerely. You know, I'd really like to go out. I don't really care where, as long as it's just for a walk. Maybe just down the street, Emily suddenly blurted out, determined not to be modest this time. It was not, of course, a confession of affection, but still, maybe he would realize that he had not left her indifferent. Hercule seemed to guess it, for he was glad of it. He accompanied Emily home, and they made arrangements for tomorrow's meeting, and she was welcomed home by a happy, bored Kieran, who had his own plans for tomorrow with his mom. I so wish you weren't going anywhere already, said the son. Why don't you get some other job so you can leave in the morning and always come in the evening, like all moms do? I'm bored without you. I'll try, buddy. Emily kissed him, who also wanted to find another place. It was so hard for her to leave her son alone for long periods of time. I'll definitely think about it. Will you let me go tomorrow night? I have a little business there. I'd really like to get away for a while. Again, the son was upset. But it's not enough that you're gone all day long. You're going to leave in the evening. I could hardly wait. I have so much to tell you. Why don't you take me with you? Emily was upset too. She realized she was depriving her child of her own company, and that was a bad thing. But what could she do? She wanted to see Hercule. In the evening, she called Maggie and told her about the date for tomorrow. Her sister was delighted. There, I told you you'd be together. Vincent, it's fate. It's their destiny. But I guess I'll have to call him now and turn him down. Kieran misses me so much. He wants to be with me. I can't abandon the baby for my love life. It's not right. Don't you agree? Did you tell your beau that you have a son? Then you could have arranged it so that you all go to some playground together or something else. The child would feel good, and so would you. Oh, I don't know if Hercule would agree. He wants to meet me and I want to meet the baby. That's not right either, Emily hesitated. You know, if his intentions are serious, it won't scare him. And if he just wants to have fun, why would you want to do that? Well, or invite him over to your house. Then spend time all together, and he'll see how you live, what kind of hostess you are. You know, you're probably right. I'm going to call him and tell him I can't leave my son, Emily said firmly. And so she did. She called, apologized, and explained that she and her son missed each other too much and couldn't bear to part ways. Maybe some other time, she suggested gently, afraid that Hercule would hang up now. but he took it with complete understanding. Yes, of course. Somehow I hadn't thought of that. Would you like to keep me company? The three of us could go out. I think there's a nice kids' cafe in the neighborhood. Emily was ready to dance with joy. She had never expected to find such an understanding and kind man who was willing to spend time not only with her, but also with her child. Of course we'd love to, she said. That day of the first date went just fine. All three were happy and had no doubt that their meeting would not be their last. Hercule seemed to be quite serious. He himself had brought up the idea that it would be a good idea for Emily to learn another profession so that she wouldn't have to go far and long. I don't know yet. I'm really not good at anything else after all, and I'm not educated. I've only got courses in conductors and nursing, and with courses they won't take me very far, she explained. Why not? You've got to find out first. Maybe it's all quite real. To work as a nurse, let's say, just in the treatment room. You do bandages, right? You give shots too. He saved me, Hercule was saying. But maybe, if only, so she answered doubtfully. All relatives and acquaintances supported her. Maggie, who had grown tired of the romance of long-distance travel rather quickly, was also not against it. Honestly, it's not for us. This job is not for moms. We'll be constantly on the road. We won't notice how our sons will grow up. And it's good if they grow up right, in the sense of good people. You know what happens to kids who are left unsupervised. Erich communicates with street children and says that it is not the best company, and many become such not because the parents died or for some other serious reasons. A lot of them have a mom and a dad. They just don't have time for kids, so they just hang around doing nothing. I'm thinking of going to school too, but of course not to study medicine, but something else. Maybe an accountant, Maggie reasoned. Emily and Hercule's relationship was developing. The young man had already become his own not only in her house, but also got acquainted with all her family. He was already perceived by everyone as a fiancé. Relations with Jennifer, he had a great relationship, and the matter was steadily moving towards the wedding. On the engagement of the whole family was invited to the restaurant. In front of everyone, Hercule handed her favorite bouquet, put on her finger ring, and asked to become his wife. The consent was met with applause. How I envy you, said Maggie. I want a love story like that, too. Shall I travel some more? I'll meet my fate, too. Actually, Maggie had already finished her accounting courses, and she'd been accepted for an internship with the company. She decided that a sedentary lifestyle was preferable for her with a child and a blind grandfather, so the words about continuing to travel were more of a joke, and her sister assured her that fate would find her at home. And so it happened that very evening in the restaurant. One of Hercule's friends noticed Maggie and asked her to dance, then on a date, and soon between them also began a relationship that led to the wedding, which occurred 6 months after the marriage of Hercule and Emily. Emily was not only a guest, but also a witness. Everyone said pregnant witness at the wedding. A guarantee of a strong family, and Emily had been expecting her second child for 6 months. Arriving at the call to the little girl, Christy froze when she saw her husband, who left on a business trip yesterday. A4. Christy walked over to the coffee machine to make herself a double shot of hot, strong savior. She had night duty in the ER tonight, and she'd never learned to sleep half an hour between calls. Any rest is just a bother. The nimble nurse Vanessa, with whom the pediatric ambulance doctor has already gone through many difficult cases, about sleep joked. Uncle Sleep has come to me again. He is starving me even on the move. I can't get coffee in me anymore. Energy drinks in bright metal cans, alas, do not save me. And they're disgusting. When the life of a child somewhere in their city held on the edge, balancing on the edge of the abyss, Vanessa was able to gather so that the doctor only marveled. Iron nerves, iron character, she remembered from her youth, a phrase either from a cartoon or from song. From herself, she mentally added, and a heart of gold of enormous size, which manages to fit love for the whole world. After each return from a call, Vanessa and their driver, Miles, fell asleep with their heads barely touching the cushions on the sofas in the lounge. Their crew chief, Christy, on the other hand, felt everything at her post, always staying fully alert. Christy embraced the still steaming cup with both hands, blissfully sipped her favorite smell with her nose, and thought with pleasure. I'll come home after my shift. I don't need to cook anything. There are a couple of cutlets in the fridge and the rest of yesterday's mashed potatoes. Winston's husband had been away on a business trip since this morning. Free the parrots from cooking for 3 days ahead. The woman stretched her legs out on the coffee table, peering at her assistants. Ashley was dozing sweetly to the peaceful hum of the split system. It had been a sweltering summer this year. The machine had been working like crazy for the past 24 hours. Where did it get its mechanical strength? Miles was sleeping peacefully. Everyone at the ambulance station knew he was in love with Cynthia. But for some reason he was hesitant to confess his feelings to her. The 6'2" big man had been in the hot zone as a contract serviceman. After the injury, Miles lost his wife, who did not want to see in the house of a freak with a scar across the cheek. In the presence of rambunctious Vanessa, the former Miles turned into a timid lamb, stammered when she asked him questions. He would blush if they made unwitting contact. Christy smiled, remembering how her Winston had cut interested circles around her almost 20 years ago. He'd approached her in the park, where she was cramming Latin on a spring afternoon so she wouldn't fail her medical school exam. "May I sit down? Is the bench next to you free?" The pretty, blonde-haired Christy flashed her gray-green eyes at him and moved her thick briefcase with textbooks closer to her. "Why didn't you like the neighboring benches? There are plenty of unoccupied benches." "I've always liked that bench in the shade of the chestnut tree. I come here often," said Winston, the burly man, and he turned red all over. "Then my arguments are over. You amuse me, girl. Let's get acquainted, shall we?" I can't dare to take the initiative myself, and holding out his palm, sweating with excitement, a little frightened Winston. Winston did not shake Christy's hand. He began frantically wiping the moisture on his light summer trousers. Christy lightly touched his hand with her fingertips and said, "And I'm Christy. For short, Chris. Sometimes my friends also call me Christine. The nickname stuck to me when I was a kid." Winston smiled happily and said, "I'd like to earn the right to be called Christina, too." "I'd like to earn the right to call you Christy, too, so I can be your friend. And let's switch to you." "Let's do it," replied the girl. "Why all the curtsy and ceremony at our age?" Christy had to run to the dormitory that day so that she could be fresh in her Latin exam tomorrow. With Winston, they agreed that he would wait for her outside the institute. If she passed the exam, they would go for ice cream and cakes at the Boulevard Patisserie. The red light on the emergency station's console lit up. The dispatcher was quickly recording something on the computer screen while making notes in the work log. "Squad, on your way. I've already uploaded the address to Miles on the app. Hurry up. It's a house on the edge of town. Baby's suffocating. Parents can't figure out what's causing the sudden attack." Vanessa quickly threw on her medical uniform and rushed down the stairs from the first floor. "Christy, I brought my suitcase. Even had time to slip your file folder in next to it. Let's not waste any time. I have a feeling this is going to be an unusual case." Quickly throwing themselves into the car, which was already parked under the vapors, the friendly trio under Christy's leadership moved on the road. The night city was slowly falling behind the hot heat of the day. It even seemed to Miles that at times the asphalt under the wheels of the old car was melting. But there was no time to think about it, and he drove carefully and quickly. If the road continued to be so deserted, they would get there in about an hour. Christy, sitting next to the chauffeur, thought, "I should have put Vanessa and Miles next to each other for that hour." As Miles drove the car at top speed, in the back of the car Vanessa was thinking sad thoughts. She had 30 years of life under her belt, not the easiest. An orphan since the 3rd year of high school. Her family was the rare case where the father of the family, who disliked strange ladies, disappeared from the house one fine autumn evening. And it all started when the woman, the mother of the household, left. Vanessa's mother fell in love with a young chef colleague and followed him to the ends of the earth. Y isn't going for 5 years practically to Alaska as head of production in a newly opened restaurant the edge of geography. After such a treacherous act of his wife, Vanessa's father went off the chain, methodically went through the entire flat, carefully searching for any images of his wife. Torn to shreds wedding photos that stood in a frame on the dresser and in the wall behind the glass, destroyed traces of the mother of little Vanessa in the bathroom. When he inadvertently flicked a view of his wife's forgotten bottle of perfume off the shelf, it shattered with a pitiful crunch against the tile on the floor. And the man stood there and stomped the shards with his feet, as if he had trampled the remains of his love in the bathtub into solid ground. Then the smell of mum was still lingering and persistent. Vanessa was only 10 years old at the time. She still couldn't understand what was wrong with her if her mum left her with her dad without even talking to her goodbye. The word love was unknown to her. Her parents did not show any romantic tendencies. They were reserved and businesslike with each other. Later, analyzing her childhood, or rather what she remembered from it, Vanessa gave herself a promise to raise the chosen one to heaven with her warm affection, not to repeat the mistakes of her parents. The girl's father drowned his longing in a rather peculiar way. He didn't resort to the bottle. He plunged headlong into work. The man who had been abandoned by his wife worked as a plumber. The master was such that to him for a couple of months queues lined up. If it was necessary to install an expensive bathtub or toilet in an elite flat without a hitch, none of the luxurious side not to scratch no one around even guessed that the miracle plumber set himself a grandiose task to earn fabulous money, fly to his wife to the north, to prove that he was her the only one favorite man from which to not run away. In a beautiful tin box from under a walnut sausage, the master collected notes of different denominations, not once even allowing himself to spend a couple of dollars on beer. The bundle grew, became a thick pile, and pleasantly warmed his hands with its heaviness. At this time, the object of his dreams there in the north, having found himself in an unaccustomed environment, did not cope with the cold realities. The tragedy was so trivial that the neighbors, the recently arrived restaurant manager, only shook their heads when they learned that she had decided to walk a couple of blocks home without a company car in the worst blizzard. The mother of little Vanessa was lost in the snowy captivity already after a couple of steps from the sky. Snowflakes descended not smoothly, as she was used to. They came down dark, icy, piercing, like a flock of large birds of prey. They covered her mouth, her nose. She couldn't breathe. Her knees buckled, as if the harsh winter had struck her with a stick. She settled helplessly into the snowdrift. There was no strength to scream, to call for help. When an hour later her husband, who began to worry, did not find her friend at home, organized a search. When the woman was found, she was still alive. She passed away later, quietly. The southern body could not cope with pneumonia. So Vanessa became a half-orphan. But they found out what had happened much later. The criminal story of Vanessa's father himself could easily have been the subject of a detective story. After his wife's sudden escape, he worked like a man possessed for a year. Finally, he'd saved up what he thought would be a strong argument for bringing his wife home. The savings came in handy, but there was no flight from their town to the far north. He had to get to a larger airport by train first. The compartment companions seemed like nice guys. They had elite French cognac in their bag. He couldn't even pronounce its name clearly. He had Ossetian pies from a nearby bakery, a couple of his favorite juicy lemons, a chocolate bar. Vanessa's father had a sweet tooth. It was a hearty dinner. He didn't even realize he was going somewhere. He became sluggish, relaxed, began to tell his new friends the story of his life. Even traitorous tears came to his eyes. When the neighbors offered him to play a few games of fool, he did not even suspect that such a gambling game only in his hands held no more than a dozen times in his life. Therefore, at the remark, "Well, you've got to be kidding. Even with epaulettes you left us. You should play for money, lucky boy. In no time you'll leave everyone here without trousers." Lucky reacted with enthusiasm. Who would give up his money bag so easily? Everyone threw in $1 on the card game. A ridiculous amount just for fun. In front of the eyes of the woe traveler, paper pictures with kings and ladies were spinning like in a mystical trick. You only had time to figure out what to throw on the table once again with a fan of colorful portraits. The first $1,000 to cheerful mates Vanessa's father lost out of pure interest, for a light drive. How did this amount in 1 hour increased 100 times? I couldn't even figure it out. My head felt like cast iron. My eyes were all blurry. For some reason he wanted to sleep. The last thing he heard as he fell into the viscous darkness was, "Ashley, help Winston, he's got his heel on his money bag." Then silence and darkness. For some reason it seemed to him that he was no longer in a compartment sitting on a bed cozily separated by a caring conductor, but was swaying together with the carriage in some narrow metal space. A sharp scraping of something metal, cold wind, wet drops of rare rain in his face. Flight. The body of my father, who had been thrown out of the train, was found a couple of weeks later in a dense roadside thicket, quite by chance, between two settlements near the railway track. In these places, even mushroom pickers and holiday makers appeared very rarely. And here a couple of lovers were brought into the forest belt. They rode their bicycles, spent some time alone, without prying eyes, and were about to go home. Attention was attracted by a red rag in the bushes, which turned out to be a colored sports bag. Then there was a long identification of the deceased, search for relatives. That's when it turned out that Vanessa's mum wasn't alive either. Where did the money intended for the restoration of the family go? How did the man end up near the railway line? No one ever found out. There was a man, and then he was gone for nothing. Vanessa, left for the period of her father's departure to the north in the care of a kind-hearted neighbor, was sent by the guardianship authorities to an orphanage. And their new walls, a new life. She was a sociable girl. Other children in the state institution shut themselves off. She, on the contrary, as if opened up to her peers and carers in her studies and in all activities. Vivacious Vanessa, with a mop of blonde hair, brown mocha-colored eyes, and a slim figure, is ahead of the world. Her favorite subjects are biology and chemistry, hobby participation in a series of theater productions. But also in sports competitions, hikes among the girls, the best friend is not to be found. In one of the educational outings, classmate Vanessa stepped on a rusty nail. Bad place, bad wound. Even the gym teacher and the young teacher were confused. It was more than a kilometer to the camp. Blood was gushing from Anthony's wound, scarlet, boiling. Vanessa and the others looked at the wound for a few seconds. Then they couldn't even tell how the fearless girl had made a tourniquet above the injured place from some rope that had come from nowhere, and shouted into the crowd. Write down for Cynthia the time she knitted it and call her. Now. She tore the white cotton shirt she wore into improvised bandages. Quickly get the first aid kit. See what disinfectants I've got, Vanessa commanded. Some aunt forgot to put a fresh batch of sterile bandages in it before the trip. A little later, having recovered from the shock, the gym teacher threw his jacket over the shoulders of the girl, who remained in one thin top. With the help of two students, he made a stretcher out of tree branches. The boy could hardly walk on his own, limping and writhing in pain. Already at the orphanage, in the inpatient medical room, Cynthia told Vanessa after the ambulance had left. I've just heard the doctors praise you for the first aid you gave so expertly. You're the one who should be singing an ode to you, not me. The old crow. Didn't you check before the trip that the first aid kit was poorly equipped? Shame on my gray head. Where did you get this professional knowledge, child? Vanessa laughed and replied, I don't know. Firstly, I love films and TV series about doctors. Secondly, it's like someone is sitting inside me and telling me, take this, and do that. That's how it came about by itself. That Vanessa chose for herself the future profession of a medic. It was not by necessity of compulsory study somewhere after the orphanage, but by a great sincere love. The ambulance drove heavily up the slight rise at the end of the alley and stopped in front of the house at 10 7th Avenue. Christy deftly picked up her suitcase and walked briskly to the wicket. Vanessa was already standing behind her, covering her rear, as usual. An old brass bell was visible on the wooden gate. And Christy thought, it's a rarity. It must have been out of commission a long time ago. But the bell did not let her down. It rang loudly in the dead silence of the empty street. Confident footsteps sounded behind the wicket, and the next moment it swung open. A silent scene. The audience might have stood up and announced the neighborhood with a tumultuous, prolonged applause. In front of Christy stood her husband, Winston, who had left on a business trip that morning. On seeing his wife, the husband stammered and whispered, Come in, please. The girl is in the house, in the back room. Christy and Vanessa rushed through the house. Iron hammers rang in the former's head. All the questions later. Right now, it's just the girl and her life. But what does it all mean? Why is Winston here? What has he got to do with this little girl? The anteroom smelled hauntingly of dusty candles piled by the front door. There was a general lack of tidiness that was evidently a constant feature of the place. In the next room were the aromas of yesterday's borscht, which had already passed more than one test, biscuits, and a little cinnamon. The little patient was lying on a small sofa, and a young lady of exotic appearance was rushing around her. Seeing her mummy, Christy was a little confused. Dreadlocks of frightened hair the color of acid fuchsia, eyes thickly lined with black. Bottom jeans with huge fancy scuffs on the knees, top a shapeless t-shirt with a strange pattern on it. The thought fluttered helplessly in my head again. Winston. What is her Winston doing here? A lover of immaculate cleanliness and classic style and dress, he couldn't possibly be here by definition, but he was standing next to her, looking at her with the pathetic eyes of a sick dog. Vanessa felt the ridiculousness of the situation. In a loud voice, she commanded, "Stand back. Let the doctor examine the girl. And you, mummy, quickly tell us what's going on." The baby lying on the pillow was so similar in appearance to Winston that Christy's heart almost stopped. Christy listened intently, a heartbeat or two she was sure to miss. It became clear that angina, neurological swelling, had affected her larynx. The girl could barely breathe. There were signs of hives on her face. The little girl involuntarily pulled her hand to the nasty spots, trying to scratch them. Surprisingly, Winston was the one to answer the EMT's questions. It was as if Christy had been poured a bucket of ice water on him, and he seemed to jump right in, too. "My daughter and I were at the circus today," he began. "There's a touring show with little artists. Ponies. Our little girl is obsessed with horses." In the second act, just as the show started, Cassandra's lips started to swell. And then her face started to swell in front of her eyes. I knew right away that something was wrong. We went to the Circus Medical Center, where my daughter was given some antihistamine. The swelling went away in a flash and we went home. At home everything was fine at first, but then Cassandra started to wheeze. I found some sawdust from the circus arena in her hands. It turned out that when she was being wheeled around by one of the pony horses at intermission, she had picked up a handful of chopped up wooden pieces on the floor, all the while sniffing them to remember how beautiful her horse was. I assume it's a severe allergy. Christy listened to his monologue and couldn't believe her ears. My daughter and I went home. Who is Winston saying all those words about? How can this be? For a moment, rainbow circles swam before her eyes. She met Vanessa's gaze and she realized the doctor wasn't feeling well. Christy was about to faint right in the middle of this small, stuffy room. Of course, Vanessa knew her colleague's husband. Undoubtedly, she realized that her doctor's handler knew nothing about her husband having a child on the side. In a decisive move, the nurse sat Christy down in a chair, waved the cotton wool soaked in ammonia in front of her nose. Only said a few words. "Suspected Quinkie's oedema. We'll get her to the hospital." The doctor nodded dejectedly. "It's a serious condition, no matter how severe the bronchial spasm." Vanessa was ready. The adrenaline and prednisolone should have bought them time. After the injections, Cassandra's face began to take on a normal color. Vanessa commented, turning to the man. "Don't just stand there. Go outside, tell our driver to bring a stretcher. We'll transport the girl to the hospital. We must try to avoid other, more complicated manipulations. I wouldn't want to put a tube in her trachea for a little girl like that." Christy acted like a robot, automatically. She woke up when she and Winston were already in the car, sitting on either side of the girl. Cassandra's breathing was still intermittent, but noticeably evened out. Winston kept his anxious eyes on the child, full of longing. And Christy was reminded of something else. After they had first met and she had passed her Latin exam, their relationship had developed rapidly. Within a week, they couldn't live a day without each other, unconditionally liked by parents on both sides. After Christy's 4th year, they married, moved into the flat of the glorious grandmother Winston. Cheerful old lady rushed to her younger sister in the village, where she enthusiastically engaged in the cultivation of flowers. She could not be lured back to the city. Christy and Winston lived soul to soul. To quarrel or to start something to find out it was not about them. They were always on the same page about everything. Tough Winston worked as a swimming coach at a children's sports school. Christy safely graduated from medical school, was going to residency. But she couldn't decide on a specialty, she joked. "I see myself as an ophthalmologist in a white coat, then a doctor in the office with a mass of shining metal instruments." Fate forced her to make a choice. After defending her diploma, As if by some command from above, now you can, Christy became pregnant. 9 months later, another sturdy little boy, Anthony, was born. Their cat, their love, and their joy. Everything developed as it should. As the happy head of the family often joked, "It's time to sit sits confidently, it's time to walk stomp briskly." Christy, at that time a little away from medicine, all tried to spend more time with his son. As if intuition suggested that this carelessness will not last long, trouble knocked on their family's door when Anthony was 3 years old. Christy's mentor, who had always told the young woman that she had an aptitude for medicine, hinted that in another 6 months she would not be welcome in any medical institution. This profession loves those who do not get distracted and are constantly improving. Even before learning that she was about to become a mum, Christy had changed her plans for her specialization. As future patients, she appointed the youngest infants, newborns. She decided to become a neonatologist, scrupulously studied all sorts of pathologies in crumbs, barely born. She was lost in the pediatric intensive care unit. But then her fervor waned. Anthony took up all her time and thoughts. To return to her chosen field of medicine, Christy had to plunge into the thick of current events of the department, where she found a place for a novice pediatrician. Anthony, the big boy, went to daycare. Winston continued his activities with his charges in the sports section. Everything in their family flowed according to the planned course. A couple of months later, the kindergarten teacher asked Christy to look at her in the methodology room after work. Here she told the boy's mother her observations and concerns. But first she asked, "Do you notice anything strange about your son lately?" Christy raised her eyebrows in surprise and opened her amazed eyes wide. "My husband and I both work very hard. We see Anthony most of the time in the evenings, but he seems healthy and alert. What exactly made you suspicious?" "We were preparing for a matinee in the group. All the folk dances the kids weren't doing right. Anthony, having made another round of the music room with his little partner, stopped abruptly and sat down on the children's chair. I didn't think much of it at the time, but your son started stopping as he walked more and more often. Christy, it seemed to me that his lips were turning a bluish color at this point. And yesterday we had a checkup with the pediatrician from our local hospital. She advised to show the boy to a pediatric cardiologist. I'm a doctor myself, also a pediatrician. I could not see anything in my son," Christy confidently replied to the teacher. And she thought to herself, or could. Without delay, the next day she took Anthony to her home department. The doctor's verdict was overwhelming. "Your son has a rare form of heart defect, which usually manifests itself only by the age of 3 or 4 years. The only way out is an urgent operation, otherwise he will not live for 6 months. His condition will worsen every day. In our city, such a complex surgical intervention is impossible. The experience of such operations has already been gained in New York. Cardiac surgery centers in Germany, Switzerland, or Israel will also be able to cope well with it." Christy and Anthony walked home with slow steps. It seemed that now her boy would get sick and his heart would not hold out. Winston rushed from the sports school as soon as she called him, and Christy kept poring over textbooks, notes, medical literature. It appeared that in their case, a favorable and a fatal outcome were equally likely, 50-50. Where can I find the point that will make the swing go in the right direction? The cost of the rare and complex surgery in New York was fabulous. As time flew by, Christy and Winston were unable to raise the necessary sum. Even selling her grandmother's old flat with her permission and moving into a one-room flat in the suburbs did not even out the balance. When one of the charitable foundations intervened in the seemingly hopeless case, everything moved forward. Finally, the operation and treatment were paid for, tickets to New York were bought, and things were packed. But Anthony died on the operating table. The swing didn't want to lean in the direction of their marital happiness and well-being. There was no negligence, no medical error, no serious preconditions, just the severe illness itself. Christy, being a pediatrician, understood all this perfectly well. But her heart froze the moment the surgeon came out of the operating theater and waved his hands, saying nothing. She and Winston understood everything at once. There was no cry, no sigh. Only they hugged each other tighter. They seemed to stand like that the whole time their son was trying to be saved under the cold glow of the bright lamps. They returned home devastated. Christy kept saying, It's time's fault. We let it slip away, while we were trying to raise money for the operation. If we'd come to New York sooner, everything would have been fine. Then she took a course to retrain as a pediatrician to work in an ambulance. It became important to her to save at least someone else's baby. That's when she first told her husband her motto. We are always responsible for everything. Some people just go through life without realizing it. 2 years after Anthony's death, Winston talked to Christy about having a second child. She herself couldn't explain why she felt the way she did now. She didn't want to give birth again, didn't want to have another child. She wanted to devote all her efforts, abilities and skills henceforth only to children in distress, sick, injured, but not her own. Winston accepted it. He did not start any more conversations on this subject, did not hint. He was there for him, his own dear to his heart. And now, they rode side by side beside his daughter by some strange girl. Christy wouldn't even mentally call her mother. As in a delirium at the bottom of her soul ruled only one thought: what could her husband and this miracle in feathers have in common? On that distant June day, when Winston wandered through the fields of the local park, it did not occur to him that on one of the benches he was waiting for his fate in the form of a girl with gorgeous gray-green eyes. A lovely beauty who had no equal in the whole world. Pretty as hell in his male sense. She was fiddling with a biro, whispering intently with her lips. She twisted a thick strand of hair on her finger, wrinkled her nose, chewed a sausage sandwich, drinking some drink from a plastic bottle, and turned the pages again. She did it all at the same time, without any confusion about the sequence of actions. Winston fell in love at first sight. His feet brought him to the bench and the girl. And then he was a little confused, so he said the first thing that came into his head, but he did not lose the power of speech. She herself had offered to meet him. She didn't refuse to go with him the next day to the ice cream parlor. In any love family story, there are two faces, two participants, two heroes. If someone were to write down Winston and Christy's memories, there would be two similar stories on paper. They realized they loved and wanted to be together. They were close, they were friendly, they understood each other. Wanted, waited, and then raised Anthony together. Everything was the same, shared. Everything was shared. Together they met a misfortune like no other. The son left, they stayed. Not by the laws of nature, the older outlived the younger. Winston fanatically wanted another child, but Christy closed the subject, perhaps forever. At his sports school, he prepared his pupils so fiercely for competition that 2 of them first took silver and gold at the city competition, and then distinguished themselves as first in the state, and went on to the federal level. Invitations to competitions all over the country came pouring out of the horn. The head coach even hinted that they might be in the running for the national cup. Christy almost did not notice now his endless trips to all sorts of business trips. She was sure that the adventures on the side of her husband will not look for adventures. They unconditionally remained the closest people who were not spared by grief. Each of them escaped from memories in his own way. That trip to a tempting picturesque resort in Florida, which was in full preparation for the soon-to-be Olympic Games, was unusual from the start. It was still a year and a half before the world's most important competition. Construction was boiling everywhere in the city. The coach and his team even tried out a new hotel and cafe on the embankment, which were designed for guests. Having appeared on a magnificent, beautiful landscape as fallen on the coast, and then also having won in the next competitions, all were going home happy. When buying tickets, the following fact came to light: too many professional people from all over the country were traveling back and forth to Florida at that time. Travel documents became scarce. The coach was forced to buy a ticket in a sleeping car SV. In a compartment for 2 with a neighbor was a girl, as it later turned out, Megan, a painter. She was going home to the city on holiday. She'd bought her ticket at the last minute too. Brown hair, blue eyes. God had a bit of a brain. She was always talking rubbish. Winston shouldn't have baptized his children with her. Athletic build, well-muscled figure, serious look, inquisitive eyes. Women always liked him, but he wasn't interested in that. He was attached to his burden, by common joys and sad ties. He paid little attention to other ladies, even if they gave him unequivocal attention. The girl in the compartment was about 10 years younger than he was. When he entered, she was eating a pie with potatoes and drinking a Coke. She nodded at the greeting, introduced herself. Terry. I'm going on holiday 9 months almost without a day off. Painter on the objects for a fortnight. The foreman gave me a holiday. Sit down. Why are you frozen like a pillar? We're here for almost 24 hours. This monologue made Winston sit down on the second shelf. The train started peacefully. A beautiful landscape floated outside the window. 10 minutes later, his boys came to visit him and immediately began to tease the coach. "Chief, can't we switch places? Such a girl is traveling with you. You won't shame the team's victories on all fronts." Terry was easy. She didn't flirt. She didn't make eyes at him. She didn't flirt with him. She didn't flirt at all. She gave him some cakes, took one of his sandwiches, went to the conductors for coffee for the two of them, waved him off. Some things women are entitled to by status. I'm already 23 years old. I look younger because of my small stature, but I'm already a lady of stature. The passenger train glided smoothly along the smooth tracks. The day outside the window changed to a long black night with few bright lights of stars in the sky. Winston and Terry discussed the latest Hollywood premieres, the mores of show business stars, the beauty of Miami, and then languidly told each other a couple of anecdotes from what they could remember. Then the conversation dried up, and they decided to go to bed. Winston flipped through some railway newspapers for a while. Terry delved into a detective story. Boring. They both lay down on their sides with their backs to their traveling companion and pretended to fall asleep. After half an hour of torment, Winston did doze off. He awoke to hands stroking his shoulders. "Don't be afraid, Coach. You're a brutal man." "Too hard to resist," Terry whispered. Winston twitched on the shelf, stood up abruptly, turned round to face her. "What are you doing, traveling companion? I told you I was married." "You've never been away from your wife, Winston? Never cheated on her?" "Of course you haven't," said the man angrily. But inside him the excitement was already reviving. Terry caught the change in his mood, and then what happened happened. "We hadn't talked much since this morning." "No, I don't want coffee." "Thank you," he said sharply. Since the evening, Terry did not raise her eyes to Winston, as if ashamed. In their own city, they went off to different sides of the platform. His memories of that night were strange. For some reason, he didn't even consider it cheating on his wife. And then the unexpected happened. In the middle of autumn, Winston, as usual, locked the door of the men's locker room, when a security guard called out to him from the lobby. "Winston, there's a girl here looking for you," the guard said. Going downstairs, Winston was surprised to see his traveling companion from the train to Miami on the doorstep of the children's sports school. She gestured for him to pass and said through gritted teeth, "How many partners I've had. But to get pregnant after one time, it's never happened before." "Hey, Coach, abortions are expensive these days. You're going to have to help me out with the money." Winston couldn't believe his ears. He could be a father again. He could have a son or a daughter. He would give half his life for such an opportunity. Quickly grabbing Terry under the elbow, he dragged her around the corner of the building to the summer sports field. There he sat her down on a bleacher near the football field and said loud and clear, "You will bear me this child, and I will be by your side and your husband, his father. Just dare to do anything to harm the baby, you'll be sorry." Terry resisted. "So who are you that I should waste my youth and life on your offspring? You found yourself a surrogate mum, free of charge, and then maybe someone will call me to marry and I'll be with your extra." They sat down again and discussed the terms. Winston in everything helps Terry financially, comes to her at any time at her first request. The baby's fate will be decided after birth. She in return leads a healthy lifestyle for the remaining 7 months, does not do anything that could harm the baby. They learnt about becoming parents of a girl after the next ultrasound. "I didn't want a boy, but a girl. I'll think about whether to keep it or make a present for you, Daddy. Have you already pleased your wife?" Terry sneered. Winston looked at her and thought, how could I have been so weak on the train to be around a woman like that? He kept preparing to talk to Christy, wanting to tell her everything, to apologize, but he hesitated and put off the explanation. Let the girl be born, and then he will confess everything to the woman he loves. Cassandra was born quickly, healthy, without any abnormalities. 5 days later, Winston took Terry from the hospital. Surprisingly, this perky woman treated the baby very carefully and reverently. Whether the maternal instinct woke up, or the fact that the girl was pretty quiet, calm. It was as if she felt that there was some impropriety in her birth daddy and mummy did not live together. There was no normal, in the conventional sense, family around. 3 months after the birth of his daughter, Winston offered Terry to draw up documents for adoption with the subsequent transfer of the baby to him, so that the woman again became free of any obligations. The refusal was unexpectedly abrupt. Moreover, Terry insisted that he did not tell his wife anything, otherwise she would lay down her bones, but she would separate him from Cassandra. At first, Winston was in doubt, wanted to involve lawyers to win back his daughter, and kept a close eye on whether Terry was treating the girl well. There was nothing to fault. She'd even managed to save up a decent amount of money for the baby, so there was no way to get her on the financial hook. As time went on, Winston got used to making visits to his second home, where Cassandra invariably greeted him with a joyful squeal. Sometimes they took walks together. Sometimes they even had lunch or dinner together as a big dad, mom and daughter. Christy was fanatical about her work, taking extra duty, not paying the slightest attention to her husband's absences. But if they were at home together in the rare hours, was almost the same kind, affectionate, attentive. Tired from the night vigil, the ambulance crew pulled up outside the emergency room of the Children's City Hospital. In a moment, 2 burly orderlies were already carrying a stretcher with Cassandra into the examination room. The doctors scurried about, immediately reassuring everyone that the girl's life was not in danger. Christy's mission was over. The girl was delivered without incident. Winston stayed with his daughter. Christy had to go back to the emergency substation. Later, in the evening, her husband would tell her everything honestly about those long-ago events on the train. Christy had almost calmed down by then. I am surprised that she did not consider her husband's brief affair a crime against their family. It was as if she felt all Winston's greed for this girl, in whom his dream of having a child was realized. People have different destinies. In different ways, heaven helps to find the happiness of fatherhood. Things began to look even busier between them. Christy advised her husband on which doll to buy, for the discharge of the girl bought for her sweets, birthday and New Year's gifts. Once only asked Winston why the little girl's mother had such a strange appearance. Winston explained that such metamorphosis with the appearance of Terry began to happen recently. Both of them had no idea at the time what Cassandra's mother's pink dreadlocks in her hair and her affectations would lead to. The thing was, Terry had fallen in love with the new guy on their crew. The man called himself a freelance nomadic painter, painted a portrait of her on the wall during breaks, and then painted over it himself with an even coat of colored paint. Terry had dreadlocks like his, a shade he'd recommended. The free artist didn't ask her out, didn't look languidly into her eyes, didn't shower her with gifts, didn't even hint at a rapprochement somewhere in a secluded corner of the construction site. He beckoned her with his bohemian spirit, his charm, even through the beautifully cut holes in his jeans. Refinement and aristocracy slipped into his every gesture, movement, turn of the head. What wind had brought this unrecognized genius to the construction site? Terry didn't ask herself. She only prayed that this artistic genius would not disappear from their educational horizon on some welcome day. Now she imitated her idol in everything, dressed like her gifted idol, smoked long thin cigarettes like her god, tasted like her prince for lunch rolls and wasabi, for dinner a glass of Italian wine and elite cheese with mold. Cassandra paid less and less attention, pretending to still be the perfect mother only when Winston showed up. There was no alarm at Winston's positive change in tone. By the New Year holidays, Terry felt that her love was no more visibly about to take wing between falling into the maelstrom of love. Nomad told her that he doesn't stay in one place longer than 2 or 3 months. He gets bored. Art school, where he learned a craft, abandoned in the 3rd year, won the craving for a change of places. In unknown lands, Terry broke away after the object of her love and a fortnight after the appearance of longing in his eyes. But first she was well prepared. She already knew that Winston had no secrets from his wife, so she invited them both to the cafe to talk about an important matter. Having ordered coffee and cakes for the whole company, to sweeten the pill, as she thought, she didn't beat around the bush. "I've met the man of my life, it seems. The kind of love people call ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. Cassandra's no longer my thing. God knows I wasn't always such a bad mother to her. I'm attached to her in my own way. Now I want to get on with my own life. If you want, Slava, draw up the documents. I'll give you my daughter and go away. Christy was shocked by this proposal. She was not the least bit opposed to Winston's daughter living with them. But how can a mother give up her child like that? The image of Anthony's little boy floated before her eyes. A sharp needle of pain pricked at my heart. If you'd come back, darling, I'd never give you up to anyone aloud, however, she said. We are always responsible for our loved ones. Winston, you haven't said a word yet. And I'm ahead of the curve, as always. We agree, Terry, to take your little girl into our family. Do the necessary paperwork. We'll sign everything. And we'll get all the paperwork together on our end for Cassandra's adoption. Easily bypassing all sorts of bureaucratic hurdles, Winston and Christy adopted Cassandra in the shortest possible time. Cassandra had always been fond of her father. Her mother's departure was explained to her as a vital necessity, and she and Aunt Christy quickly hit it off. Cramped but not cramped. Now in their small one-room flat there was always a little bell-ringing voice, always taking part in all the household chores. Cassandra and Papa Winston hung the laundry on the balcony, helping Aunt Christy. And then the female half of the family would bake treats in the kitchen. From the other room came the voice of the head of the family. Hurry up and come and have tea. That would have been the end of the story. But it is not for us to decide what fate will do. She has already prepared new trials for these people. Another team was to go to the house where the house collapsed. Somebody in the heavenly office decided otherwise. A nurse at a neighboring substation slipped on the porch. The first frost had just arrived in the city, and the insidious ice had been forgotten. Somewhere on the other side of town, near a collapsed house, an ambulance was waiting for the unfortunate victims. The medical worker's leg swelled up before his eyes. Even without x-rays, it was clear to the specialists it was a fracture. Christie's team was rushed to the scene. Vanessa, as always, Miles indispensable for traveling on any type of road, Christie focused. All assembled were good to go. Even Vanessa doesn't argue about riding in the back. She quickly climbs into the seat with Miles in the cab. No time for arguments and bickering. A couple of days ago, Christie and Vanessa had a serious conversation. Outside of work, they are friendly and on a you basis. Only at work they keep the chain of command. The doctor started the dialogue. But I began to my subordinate not for faults in the service, but for Miles. Don't you have a heart? The whole substation is judging that Miles is pining for you, and you're like not native. I mean, he's good on the inside and out. And the scar on your face, that's a good look for a man. Why are you climbing the wall? I mean, he recoils at any touch from me. Am I unpleasant to him? Am I long? If he touches me, he bounces back. How am I supposed to understand this reaction to me? And you say he's in love. It's all bollocks. Now Vanessa drove beside Miles and again involuntarily admired his masculine profile. She was no longer intimidated by the scar that cut across his eyebrow and snaked down to his lips. Miles was attractive with that very masculine beauty that promised protection and strength to those around him. What remained a mystery was how deliberately he was avoiding her. If he loved her, why did he keep his distance? Miles was afraid to come within a meter of this woman. He was too fond of this person to offend her by an involuntary display of his masculine interest. Now, as soon as Vanessa turned briefly to the window, he glanced at her to admire her unassuming but lovely beauty again. When the nurse returned her head to its original position, Miles sat as if nothing had happened, staring straight ahead at the road. A crowd of curious people had gathered in front of the house where the collapse had occurred on the third and very last floor of a rather old building. It buzzed like hundreds of alarmed bumblebees, filled with rumors, fed with anxious reports from the rescuers, to buzz again in full force. You heard there was a girl crushed by something heavy on the ground floor. She's screaming in pain, and our brave rescuers can't get to her yet. Upon hearing this information, skinny and petite, Christie commanded, Vanessa, prepare a syringe of anesthetic. I'll try to get through to the injured little girl. At those words, Miles and Vanessa turned around without conspiring. You can't do that until the rescue team gives the go-ahead. The house could collapse at any moment. "It's not the time to be afraid," the brave woman replied. "There is a child there alone, scared, suffering pain. Why do we even have an ambulance if the rescuers are as slow as turtles?" With a syringe of medicine in her outstretched hand, Christy rushed towards the building, near the wall of which the firemen in shiny helmets and the guys from the rescue service were working at the same time. "Woman, where are you going?" Christy was called. "I'm going to try to crawl over to the girl and give her an anesthetic injection. I'm an EMT. It's too narrow in there. None of our guys could get in," she was warned. "I'm going to try anyway." Building rubble, chunks of plaster falling off, blue paint streaks from the wall in the entryway, more rubble and endless dust. Christy was forced to kneel at first, then moved almost crawling. In her mind, she thanked her husband for making her keep fit all these years, going to the swimming pool twice a week, jogging with him in the mornings. At the end of the climb, she finally saw a little girl who had been crushed by a metal door from one of the flats. The little girl's legs were pressed against the heavy rectangular plate like a press, and for some reason they were sticking out towards the exit. It was as if the child had been running and trouble had caught her as she ran. She turned back and called out in a ringing voice, "Here, I'm quite through. 2 skinny men and a girl were crushed by the door, but I'm already giving her an anesthetic injection." "Don't shout. For God's sake," came a whisper in reply. "Loud noises in such a dilapidated building are dangerous now." After a couple of minutes, the baby quieted down. Christy began to shoulder the metal barrier into the flat. With difficulty, but the thing moved. There were rustles from behind, and the woman whispered. "The girl is relaxed by the injection. Drag her by her legs. I'll keep pushing the door in the opposite direction." Together the work went more vigorously. The men pulled the girl to the exit through the narrow labyrinth. The way back no longer seemed so uncharted. Christy hesitated for only a few minutes. Outside, people still didn't realize what had happened next. The building started to collapse like a house of cards before their eyes. Only 2 young boys managed to jump out of the building with a little girl in their arms. Christy, a well-known pediatric emergency room doctor in the city, was buried under the rubble forever. Calm. Always quick to focus in difficult situations. Vanessa, the nurse, screamed, rushed to Miles, who had already grabbed her in an armful and started stroking her head like a little girl. It seemed to both of them that they were now being swallowed up before their eyes by some ravenous monster, a toothy maw of rock-strewn debris. It lured Christy, who had bravely stepped into the tunnel with the syringe, inside and swallowed her without choking. People were bustling around. Someone said that the fate of 4 more tenants, orphaned in an instant, was unknown. Christy's crew stood in the midst of the chaos, hugging each other tightly. A little later, with the pretense that their presence here is no longer needed, went to the car, without unhooking the embrace. They had to go to Winston's now to tell him and little Cassandra the bitter news. A fortnight passed. Miles and Vanessa now had a new doctor in charge, an elderly pediatrician who had transferred to the ER from the city's children's clinic. The silent and even a little stern man was a qualified and experienced specialist. But the nurse and the driver felt their close-knit brigade went sole. Everything seemed to be as usual, and everything was wrong. There was no desire to go to work. The day Christy passed away in front of their eyes, they rushed straight to her house. Cassandra was in kindergarten. Winston was packing his bag to leave for another training session. Vanessa had never before seen the emotion on the face of someone who had learned sad news show in such a way. After their account of the last few minutes, it was as if a blackness had run across Winston's face. Just now his eyes were alive and shining. And then the light in them went out and his skin took on a gray hue. How can I find words to comfort a man in such a situation? Everything said would seem empty and unnecessary. Vanessa and Miles realized that now they were superfluous in the midst of this scorched desert. They did not want to scatter. Some thick, strong thread now bound this couple, who had just witnessed a terrible, hopeless tragedy. They arrived at Vanessa's flat together after their shift. It seemed to them both now that no words were needed to explain to each other how much time they had lost. Vanessa cooked a meal as if she'd done it for her and Miles 1,000 times before. Both of them had such a voracious appetite after the stress they'd been under, that a huge pan of fried potatoes, generously drenched in eggs, had been devoured in about 5 minutes. Before, Miles had always thought that if Vanessa were near him, he would pounce on her like a hungry wolf. That's not what happened. He had such tenderness for this woman that a little more and he would melt like ice cream in hot weather. Miles felt such happiness inside that it seemed as if all the long agony of waiting hadn't happened. When Vanessa fell into a restless sleep, he was still unable to fall into a restful slumber. He wondered if he had imagined that she, his woman, his dream, his vision, was really sleeping on his shoulder. He was very impressed by the warmth with which Vanessa touched even his ugly scar on his face, how she kissed the curved line, looked into his eyes, whether he liked her kind touch, and acted as if she were a hero, a protector, a support. He immediately remembered the disgust on his wife's face when he returned from the hospital after being wounded. They had not uttered a single word of "I love you," "I need you," or "I need you." Everything in their story had been said long ago. Now they were just proving to each other that everything wasn't a mistake, that it was worth it to be patient and wait for things to happen the way they had now. In the morning, Vanessa said nonchalantly, "Miles, you'd better stop by the house and pick up your things. At first, my flat is closer to work and more spacious. Then we'll figure out what to do with your place. I'd join forces with you and exchange our property for something bigger." Miles hadn't known what a quiet family home was before. He and his wife had lived in perpetual separation. He had felt a kind of adamancy all the time then, a kind of coldness within the home walls. It was like he was together with that woman of his. A persistent feeling that they live apart he never let go. That's why he was always on duty. With his Vanessa, it was different from the start. Some kind of reassurance that he was needed and important. That even when he goes to the supermarket to get groceries on behalf of his girlfriend, they have time to miss him. And they greet him so warmly on the doorstep, as if he were returning from some distant journey. Winston, after the tragic death of Christy, lived as if in a delirium. In the morning, he automatically prepared sandwiches and coffee for himself, while stirring on the cooker porridge on milk for Cassandra. The girl became his salvation, his outlet, his light in the window. In his spare time, he couldn't stay in their tiny flat at all. He, Christy, and his parents, after the grief that had fallen on the family, immediately gave up sharply. Almost simultaneously, they became helpless old men. The two eldest of the family began to seek solace in working the land, fanatically planted everything in a row in the garden, finding in this work, if not joy, then oblivion. They tried not to think, not to remember. Even their granddaughter was stubbornly not taken to them on weekends, and they couldn't cope with Cassandra, who asked 100 questions in a minute. Winston took his daughter on impromptu camping trips at weekends. They would go to a river somewhere far away, pitch a tent, wander around the steppe, pick wildflowers for Christy's grave. On the way back, they'd always stop at the cemetery. Winston sat down on a wooden bench and talked for a long time with his beloved woman, who had passed away prematurely. Unhurriedly, he would tell how his and Cassandra's week had gone. Sometimes he proudly boasted that his charges had again won another prize at a prestigious competition. Christy looked up at him from the photograph with her gray-green eyes and smiled that smile of hers with which she liked to announce her life motto. "We are responsible for everything. If something happens on the road, be good enough to go to the victorious end." After visiting the cemetery, Winston felt better for a while. And he also noticed a new peculiarity. He was annoyed by carefree women on the street. A cheerful girl would come along, and he would look after her and think angrily, "I wonder, my dear, and you would step like this, without fear under the ruins of a building held by a thread, if a stranger's child was crying there." A dark annoyance enveloped him. Why did they all go on living and his youth is gone from him forever? Cassandra had grown up all at once. In her very young years, she had turned into a sort of wise old woman. She'd never been cranky since kindergarten. Buckwheat porridge with sausages is the best meal for dinner, and the 101st time she read a bedtime story about Cinderella. Every time was like a new discovery. She wasn't afraid to stay home alone if Winston had to go somewhere urgent. After such absences, she'd always ask him thoughtfully, "Tired? Shall I put the kettle on? Let me take your dirty socks to the bath." She'd already lost her second mum, but she never asked Winston any questions along the lines of, "When's Mum coming back?" or "Why are we living together?" They were having a good time. Even in this orphaned solitude, they always understood each other with half a word, half a look. Sometimes in the evenings, Miles and Vanessa came round with cakes or cake. Then they would have noisy tea parties together. They remembered Christy with a light sadness. All four at the table loved her. All four of them missed her very much. Winston sometimes painfully wanted to go somewhere far away from this city, where everything reminded of the happy past. But where to get a new, well-trained team of athletes? And his wife's grave is here. The old people are near. I had no desire to fight reality, no matter what. The anniversary of Christie's death was celebrated in a cafe. The brave doctor's former colleagues took care of everything themselves. Winston, Cassandra, parents were brought to the institution, where everything was already ready. Miles and Vanessa recently signed a marriage, deciding not to delay any longer with the officialization of their relationship. Their family was expecting a new addition in a couple of months. They had recently moved into a new flat, having bought it, as they were going to do, with the money from the sale of their bachelor flats. Many warm words were said to Christy at the table. No one wanted to part quickly. This time even Winston's parents expressed a fervent desire to take the girl to themselves for a couple of days. They sincerely missed the little girl. Having seen off the last guests who had gathered in honor of his wife's memory, Winston wandered home through the very park where they had once met. The same bench in the shade of an old chestnut tree. The same alleys of shrubs and flowers, hiding couples in love from prying eyes. In the far corner of the footpath, some company was frolicking all around. There were 3 young men. All together they surrounded some girl, not allowing her to take a single step. Winston's eyes darkened for a moment. The victim of the youths was an exact replica of his wife in their early youth. Slim, with a lock of loose hair, the girl stood helplessly between the boys, clutching a dainty handbag. The boys moved predatorily toward Megan, tightening the ring around her more and more. Winston added a step. "Guys, don't you think the lady doesn't want to mingle with you?" One of the young predators turned his head slightly, hissed. "Man, you'd better keep walking past. We'll handle our friend here on our own without interference." A cold chill of rage ran through Winston's body, quickly turning into an angry volcanic scorcher. It was infinitely important to him right now to save this young girl, to stop the insolent subjects from mocking her. Even if the whole company was long and well acquainted, even if there was truly nothing threatening her. It was important to him to get her away from those insolent guys and get her away from here. "I don't think the brisk man understands us," one of the guys said. "Go the other way out of here, passerby. We're all our own people here, and you're an extra." Winston glanced at the girl, whose green eyes were filled with despair. She was silent, but her eyes were pleading for help. Winston could not be mistaken that she was uncomfortable with the unpleasant scene that had been played out here. "The girl will leave with me," Winston gave the boys an ultimatum. "Or are you going to regret that our paths have crossed?" "Look at that funny man," grinned one of the trio, stepping away from his friends and standing opposite Winston. "He doesn't understand orders the first time. He's got a bit of a hound." The boy quickly slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out a small knife. "How's that for an argument, noble knight, who decided to save the honor of a lady he didn't know? Would you rather I tickle your throat with this toy? Or let's see if our lovely Megan likes that kind of game." Winston often dropped by to visit the instructors who rented one of the gyms at the martial arts school. He wasn't afraid of any attacks from the youngsters. Now it was important to him that they did not touch the girl, so similar to his wife at the time of their first dates. The boys rushed towards their victim, who instead of fleeing the scene, froze in place like a statue. They began to come in from all sides, but Winston was only aroused by this. He only had a couple of shots of vodka that night. The rest was done by hatred for the scum who thought that they were the masters of this park, that they were untouchable, and everything was allowed to them. And how much older he was than them, about 10 years, no more. They could almost be considered as one generation, but in the eyes of his opponents there was so much cruelty, felt such a craving for lawlessness and permissiveness, that it did not fit into the framework of decency and the understanding of the coach. The fight began sharply and fiercely. The guy with the knife scratched Winston's shoulder with the sharp blade almost immediately, as if teasing and inviting him to do more. The toughest of the three assailants grinned into Winston's eyes, trying to break him mentally at the start. The girl stood so still, mouth open, either from fear or confusion. "Get out of here," Winston shouted to her. "I don't want you here in a second." But she would not give up and shook her head vigorously. "I'm not leaving you alone with them. They've been after me for a long time. And here was a chance to be caught alone without friends, and even at a late hour. We all study together at the university, boys from the elite, from the golden youth. And I am an orphanage. It's like a red rag for a bull, for them. Everyone wonders what kind of life I had in childhood and youth in a state institution. It was not customary for us to leave our own behind. I'll be there for you." Winston was so distracted by the girl's monologue that he missed a couple of solid punches to the ribs. Something crunched inside a fracture, he thought grudgingly. Meanwhile, the guy with the knife decided to have a different kind of fun. He jumped up behind the fellow student and pressed the blade against her lower cheek. "So you say, my kitty, you're not used to leaving your own behind?" He grinned. "And if I scratch your throat on your cheeks now, will you abandon the whole park?" The girl, to everyone's surprise, who had been in a daze before, did not faint. She turned to the guy. A thin trickle of blood ran down her cheek. "I'm so sick of you at uni, you bastards and scum," she shouted. "You're nothing without your mums. You're nothing without a stick. That's what you can do for yourself in this life. If they take away your expensive car, your bling, your bank card, what will you know when you have to survive in a wild pack of teenagers?" None of the men involved in the fight expected such a fight from the pretty student. The boys were completely furious, even their faces darkened with uncontrollable rage. Having removed the knife from the girl's throat, her opponent joined his friends. Now they surrounded Winston on all sides, like a mass of bodies and faces distorted by anger. He himself could not remember how he had pushed their supposed leader in the chest with all his might. He did a sort of gymnastic somersault, lifting his feet off the ground, and fell down on his back. The back of his head struck the sturdy curb of the alley. A ruby stain of thick blood instantly began to spread beneath the young man's head. Winston, who had so many times taken his boys from the section to the infirmary after injuries, instantly realized that it was bad. Habitually, he put his finger on his opponent's neck in the place where a vein usually beat. There was no pulse. The rest was like a blur. The girl regained consciousness. "First, call an ambulance and the police now. Nobody leave," she commanded. The boys frantically began to grab their phones, making calls to parents, services, and important acquaintances. Winston sat down on the curb next to a guy and thought frantically. "Cassandra is now at home with her parents, who wanted to keep an eye on her today. I'll be detained, most likely. What will happen to the girl?" He quickly beckoned the young student over to him. "What's your name?" "I'm going to need your help." "I'm Maggie. Tell me what needs to be done." "I'm Winston. Here's a note with my address, my flat keys, my friends Miles and Vanessa's phone number. My 5-year-old daughter Cassandra is at her parents' house right now. Take her and give her to my friends. They'll take care of her." When the police, ambulance, and a bunch of other people arrived, Winston was somehow completely calm. As the saying goes, you can't be safe from jail or want, he thought. I guess it's my turn to learn what it's like to eat government bread and live behind bars. So many important gentlemen had arrived, commanding the men in the prison and the guards who had come with them. Winston was probably lucky that he was taken to the police car at once. Otherwise, the loose dogs surrounding the dead guy's powerful father would have killed Winston on the spot. Maggie, who had been rescued by him from the borderless scum, was always hanging around him. She even managed to show the ambulance the cut on her neck to get a certificate of beatings, all the time she was telling something to the operatives and the investigator. They were brought to the police together. Winston's documents and mobile phone were immediately taken away. While they were dealing with him, Maggie ran like a mouse to the side and made a few phone calls. Then, meeting Winston's eyes, she gave him a thumbs up, saying that the mechanism for taking care of his daughter had been set in motion. She turned out to be a desperate person who manages to keep up with everything. At the trial, she presented everything in such colors that the rich, Successful relatives of the participants of the fight were even astonished by such frankness. She found witnesses that the trio of golden boys had been harassing and humiliating her for a long time. Everyone in their group respected her, while these fellow students disliked her. It's not a pretty picture for the victim. Of course, Winston never wanted to hurt a guy who was just starting to live. It was too cruel, even for a young man with a temper. It just worked out the way it did. He was given 5 years in a penal colony for excessive self-defense. Thanks to Maggie's efforts, the judge made the best decision for him. The prosecution insisted on 8 years in prison, but she kept trying to shift the case to a less serious article. Winston did not know exactly how Miles and Vanessa managed to agree with the guardianship authorities, but his daughter Cassandra was given to them for upbringing during his stay in the colony. During the investigation, their family gave birth to Thomas the rosy-cheeked Thomas. The ambulance crew in the city turned out to have connections because they often saved the children of not only ordinary people, but also important officials. When Vanessa was allowed a date, she was able to reassure Winston. "Don't worry, mate, we'll be fine. You and Christy are not strangers to us. I'll write to you about her life regularly and with pleasure. Miles and I will come to your place for a date as soon as we're allowed. I thought you were doing time in a neighboring state. Well, it's not that far for us. And tell me, what are we going to do about your rescued Maggie?" Maggie visits the daycare center all the time, bringing her toys and sweets. She asks for our permission to take the girl out of kindergarten, walk with her in the park, go to the cinema for the premiere of a cartoon. Here did not think that the girl will turn out to be such a loyal friend. We met with her, of course, not under the best, one could even say, tragic circumstances. She so actively defended you during the investigation, so fiercely acted in court as the main witness. You never know how someone like that will behave in extreme circumstances. She was a good one. Jesus, Winston, you're so naive when it comes to the opposite sex. She fell in love with you at first sight. Chivalrous demeanor, protective, good looks. But you're wrong about your age. She went to university after law school. She's 23 now. You're only 9 years apart. She's the one who looks so young because of her petite stature and general fragility. She's got character. Look at the girl. You can't take Christy back. You're going to have a lot of good things ahead of you. You both deserve it. The guard who led the prisoner after his date with the young woman didn't understand why the stout man was smiling all the way to his cell. He could not have guessed that Winston was thinking that there might be happiness in his life if this vivacious person with green eyes waited for him after his imprisonment. Love comes in many forms. Someone constantly trades feelings for trifles, and someone remains the chosen one for many years without fear and reproach. It's a matter of luck. Having overheard a strange conversation at her grandfather's funeral, Xusha hurried to the old apple tree, and barely ... in P4. As to what Sabrina hated sad funeral ceremonies. Well, of course, no one asked her permission to live or go beyond the boundary from which no one could return. Right now, she knew as soon as she saw Charlotte on her smartphone screen. She knew it was bad news from her neighbor. "Sabrina, hello, darling." Charlotte's voice came through. "It's Aunt Charlotte calling. I'm sorry to break the bad news to you this morning, but your father's phone isn't working, so I've had to break it to you. Vincent died recently. I go to work and I see him doing something under the apple tree, half turned towards the street. I'm waving at him. Vincent, good morning. Godspeed. I asked him what he was doing early in the morning. Was he raking or picking up fallen fruit? And Vincent had no emotion. He didn't even move. Though you know my voice is loud, it's impossible not to hear it. So I went to the gate, opened the latch, came up to Vincent, and he wasn't breathing. I'm sitting here on the porch, and I've called all the services, except the funeral parlor. It's not up to me to see Vincent off. But Sabrina, honestly, I have to go to work. Would you come?" Sabrina replied in a husky voice. "Of course, Aunt Charlotte. I'm leaving now. I'll be there in about 30 minutes. The sad news that her paternal grandfather had passed his last frontier came as a shock to Sabrina. Vincent, always cheerful, was something she hadn't expected. She had to go, of course, organize everything, call everyone in her grandfather's phone book. But she wanted to convince herself, shiveringly, that this conversation with her neighbor was just a bad dream. Now I should open my eyelids wide and look at the call history. Make sure the call never happened. Unfortunately, that hope was not realized. There had indeed been a call from Aunt Charlotte, and Sabrina did her best to get to her grandfather's cottage, which was technically located within the big city but in the private sector. As soon as she got into the taxi, Sabrina asked her boss for time off. Then she had a short conversation with a colleague in the office, explaining where the documents were, for which, as it turned out, today clients had to come. The most difficult call the girl did not dare to make: how to inform her parents that they have to cancel a trip abroad to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the wedding, that they had to return urgently to say goodbye to Grandpa Vincent. Sabrina felt sad. What an unexpected tragedy. She'd spoken to her grandfather just the day before yesterday, and he'd told her he was expecting her to visit. He asked her to come soon, not for the sake of tending a small vegetable garden, but to consult on something. Sabrina promised him a weekend, which had recently passed. She could well have visited her grandfather, but she was a little ill, postponed the visit, apologized. They chatted for a while about nothing. Grandpa Vincent recalled the way his wife Shirley, Sabrina's grandmother, had always done things. The girl heard that she should brew linden blossom, wait until the infusion cooled to a pleasant warmth, stir a spoonful of honey into a glass of the healing liquid, drink it, and lie down under a blanket. She promised that she would heal herself and then visit him. And in the first month of autumn, when she was scheduled to go on holiday, Sabrina promised to stay with him for at least a week. God, what a shame, Sabrina thought now, regretting that she was going to wait for a holiday. After all, it took about 45 minutes to get to her grandfather by public transport. When there were no traffic jams on the roads, it was possible to head not home after work, but to a loved one who had lived a little over a year and was incredibly bored alone. All the more embarrassing was the fact that Sabrina was free and could keep her lonely grandfather company, traveling to and from work, even by taxi, more expensive than public transport, but quick and comfortable. Alternatively, Sabrina could simply leave the house a little earlier to walk in the private sector to the transport stop where the tram of the desired route departed. Everything would absolutely have been solved, somehow managed and sorted out. But she had not had the foresight to realize that Grandpa Vincent required care and supervision, and that his requests to come were not a mere whim, but the wishes of a lonely elderly man. Sabrina felt an agonizing sense of shame. And sighing, she tried to call her parents. However, both her dad's and mom's number were out of range. The girl had to send an email, hoping that the unpleasant news would not be read too late after solving the rest of the issues. The time on the journey to her grandfather's house flew by. Sabrina stepped out of the taxi and, after listening to Aunt Charlotte's sympathy, felt a real grief come over her. Her neighbor hugged the girl who had arrived, told her to hang in there, and ran to work. Sabrina looked at her grandfather and waited for him to get up, pull himself up and call her into the house or into the arbor with grapes. However, the miracle did not happen. The neighborhood services that arrived on the call conducted another ritual associated with the passing of the older generation. The paramedic pronounced Vincent dead, presumably from a heart attack. She advised Sabrina to contact the funeral agencies and explain that they had specialists who could organize grieving procedures with due respect for the deceased and sympathy for his relatives. Sabrina heeded the advice and tried with all her might to hold back the bitter tears of despair. It was not until dinner time that the girl was alone. Sabrina entered her grandfather's house, crying when she saw the phone on the table, which he had apparently forgotten on his last morning. Probably if he had had the mobile phone, he would have been able to call somewhere and ask for help. But there was no changing the past. Things just happened the way they did. The girl had discovered the hiding place that Grandpa Vincent and Grandma Shirley had told her about shortly after she came of age. The man then pulled back the rug hanging over the bed, pressed gently on one of the wooden panels, then with a slight movement slid it aside. Surprised, the girl saw a deep vertical niche. Grandfather explained, "Here, granddaughter, these are our funeral ones. Shirley and I have been quietly putting money in here, so as not to be a burden to anyone." Sabrina remembered how she had started nagging her grandparents back then, said it was too early for them to be thinking about such a topic. She assured them they'd have great-grandchildren to nurse. "No, my dears, that won't do. First, you'll have to consider my fiancé approve, and then you'll have to help raise the babies. Mummy and Daddy are always busy." Grandmother, stroking her smiling granddaughter's head, quietly objected. "Sabrina, it's not like we're asking you if it's too early to think about your last journey in this world or not. We're just showing you so you know just in case. After all, Vincent's 70th birthday is this year. And I'm a little younger. Alas, at that age, anything can happen. Your parents know about the stash, of course. What if they're shy or modest?" Grandpa Vincent supported his wife. "We don't want to be a burden to you. Well, let's get this conversation over with." Grandmother hurriedly changed the subject and began to talk about the amusements of a little kitten she had picked up, unpretentiously nicknamed Man. Now, 6 years after this conversation, the skinny little boy has turned into a well-fed, long-haired, and independent handsome. His owner's departure was a real shock to the animal, and he even lost his excellent appetite for a few days. However, Grandpa Vincent managed to bring the cat out of this state, and now this mission fell to the share of Sabrina. It seemed to Sabrina that the orphaned cat understands everything, and that's why he curled up in a ball on his grandfather's bed and doesn't even react to the sound of the refrigerator door opening. The agency recommended by the ambulance lady really turned out to be professional. A serious man suggested Sabrina to organize a farewell not at home, but in a special ritual hall at the cemetery. It was much easier to get there than here, in the private sector. And the house, though big, would still be cramped. "There is no fuss and crowding. The hall there is convenient, comfortable," said the man. "Everyone will be able to say goodbye quietly, and without the crush that usually accompanies the removal from the flat or house. Everything will be touching and civilized. Besides, it will save you a lot of trouble." Sabrina thought it was a reasonable suggestion, but she had to spend not only her meager savings but also Vincent's grandfather's stash to pay for the funeral. She did everything necessary, as if in a daze, waiting for her parents to arrive, or at least to reply to an email, but in vain. Sabrina contacted the hotel where they had booked the room, but as she understood from the reply in broken English, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson did not check in. They explained that they had decided to change their plans slightly. Sabrina was worried about her parents, but there was nothing she could do. Clods of earth began to fall on Grandpa Vincent's coffin lid, but neither his son nor daughter-in-law showed up. It was Sabrina who received the condolences and sympathy, and she had to listen to the lamentations of the distant relatives who had come to see the old man off. Some unashamedly spoke out about the irresponsible son and daughter-in-law who did not attend the mournful event. The girl defended her parents as best she could, and the guardians of other people's morals were silent for a while, transferring the conversation to other topics. Gradually, only relatives and the closest of neighbors remained at the memorial table in a small cafe. Sabrina, who had last seen most of them just under a year ago at Grandma Shirley's farewell, could hardly stand all the questioning. She wanted to run away from the cafe, but she had to fulfill her duty as a granddaughter to the end. From time to time, she took out the dirty dishes and brought memorial treats along with the waiters. As long as she didn't have to sit at the table listening to the loud conversations of those gathered. By chance, Sabrina overheard part of a conversation between Aunt Charlotte and Grandpa Michael's cousin as they served another batch of pies. "Vincent used to talk to that apple tree like a person sometimes. I told him when Shirley was alive that we should cut that useless tree down," Michael said. "It's grown over the roof of the house, and you can't get apples for nothing. Shirley, God rest her soul, used to complain about how useless that tree was. One year it bore so much fruit that you'd be tired of putting it away. The next year it didn't bear a single fruit. She kept threatening to cut it down and plant some summer tree like a peach. Only Vincent, a blessed memory, always stood up for the apple tree." Aunt Charlotte nodded in agreement. "You're right. I thought it was strange, too, Vincent's fondness for that old apple tree. If it was a hectare of land, it wouldn't be too much of a waste of space. But in such a small area, it seemed silly to leave such a huge tree." A snippet of conversation made Sabrina think. Indeed, grandfather treated that apple tree as a living thing. The girl had often seen him affectionately stroking the bark of the tree as he passed by. One day when Sabrina was a child, she decided to play and climbed up on a branch, which broke under her weight. Grandfather Vincent left his granddaughter in his wife's care and began to treat the wound on the tree himself. Lately, after Grandma Shirley's death, Grandpa had preferred to rest alone under the apple tree, rather than in the specially built gazebo covered with grapes. Thoughts of the mysterious apple tree Vincent had singled out briefly receded before the sad worries. The relatives were the last to leave the rented hall, and Michael reminded Sabrina. Someone has to spend 40 days and nights at Vincent's house. Would you be okay alone until your parents showed up? Maybe I should send someone with you. At least take my Tracy, my youngest daughter, with you. Sabrina noticed the look on Tracy's face, a woman of about 35 who clearly had her own plans for the evening and had no desire to spend the night in a place she didn't know. Thank you, but I can really manage on my own. After all, it's kind of a token of my respect for my grandfather. Saying goodbye to everyone, the girl hurried home from the public transport stop, as her relatives had to go in different directions. Barely opening the gate of her grandfather's house, Sabrina had time to regret that she had tried to create an image of an independent and strong person. Of course, she wasn't too young to be afraid of an empty house, but she'd already spent a few nights here all alone. Would she be able to cope? She began to ponder again the reason why the tree held such an important place in her relative's life. Pensively, the girl stroked the sad cat. But being in the house, even in the company of an animal, was somehow uncomfortable for her. Sabrina went out into the yard and, obeying a sudden impulse, approached the apple tree, on which somewhere high hung green small fruits. A chill ran down her back. When she saw the scratches on the ground, there was no doubt that Grandpa Vincent had left those marks. It got really creepy when Sabrina had the crazy thought that the dying old man was digging up the ground, not in agony, but trying to dig up something. The girl went to the barn, took a small garden trowel from there, and returning to the apple tree, began to carefully dig into the ground. Almost immediately, the trowel hit something hard. Sabrina began to dig with the utmost care and soon pulled out of the shallow hole a hard rectangular package wrapped in a bag and additionally sealed with duct tape. The girl had never heard any stories about family heirlooms and was truly shocked. At home, Sabrina laid an old towel on the table, already asking for a well-deserved rest somewhere in a landfill. She laid her find on it and carefully opened the package with the kitchen knife her grandfather always kept sharp. Beneath the layers of duct tape in the package was a metal candy box. The girl held her breath as she opened it and saw not jewelry or money inside, but papers. Sabrina scrutinized the contents of the box. There were envelopes underneath double-folded notebooks, clearly written in her grandmother's smooth handwriting. Judging by the fact that the package was quite modern, with the emblem of a chain supermarket, and the paper was neither frayed nor yellowed, the girl concluded that the find had not been in the ground long. Thinking that it wouldn't be a big deal if she knew what Grandpa Vincent had tried to dig up before he died, Sabrina began to study the find, turning first to Grandma Shirley's notes. My dear Vincent, I am writing you this note of confession, realizing that I do not have much time left in the world, and that it is wrong to take this secret away with me. Forgive me, Vincent, for the deception and even the crime I committed many years ago because of my love for you. It's hard to confess, but I must. You and I were married then. My daughter was in kindergarten, and I was back at work at the post office. Everything was going so well, I was jealous of myself. And then, like a blow to the head, I sorted through the mail and saw a letter addressed to you. The sender was one Marian Lopez from Center City, Texas. I got a bad feeling in my heart. I didn't give it to you. I read it myself. That's how I found out about your affair while you were digging up virgin land in Kansas. Your ex wrote that it was her strict father who arranged your separation in 1964, threatened to kill you or put you in jail using his connections for having an underage relationship. In fact, he left her only option was to lie to your eyes that she didn't love you one bit and didn't want to see you again. The mother tried to stand up for her daughter, but it didn't help. The woman was simply beaten by her own husband for daring to interfere. When Marian saw what your father had done, she was terrified for you. That's why she said what she was told to say with conviction. After this brutal confession, you predictably flared up, packed your things, took an apple sapling as a souvenir for your parents, and returned home. She wrote that she was pregnant by you, and to hide the sin, she was married without official registration in the registry office to some widower, with many children in a remote settlement that did not even have a name. I read Marian's letter in the dark, and even began to empathize with your young lover. She complained that her family life had failed. The man she had to live with treated her like a servant. Marian named her baby girl, your daughter, after her mother, Cheryl, despite the scandals with her in-laws. The unfortunate young mother was literally enslaved. She endured beatings, humiliation, and relentlessly planned her escape. When her daughter grew up, Marion found it even harder. The native children of this so-called husband began to abuse the girl, and her mother could not say a word in her defense. The beating started right away. It was only after 5 years that Marion managed to escape from her husband. She did not give details, but from the blurred letters from the spilled tears, it was clear it was very difficult. Marion asked you to come and fetch her and her daughter at this very center. She said she would wait for you. When I read the letter, it was as if I'd gone blind and deaf all at once. I didn't know how I was supposed to go on. Giving you the message meant losing my family. We only had a 3-year-old daughter. How could I take away her father with my own hands? How would she grow up without you? I confess, I destroyed that first letter, threw it in the oven. I thought I was protecting my family. I was wrong. Marion continued to send letters. The next one came almost a year later. Apparently she was timing it so you'd hear from her and her daughter on your birthday, asking why you didn't answer her. How could I have been afraid that she'd pack up and come to you? It's not that far, maybe a little over 300 miles. Or something like that. So we're almost next door to someone who could ruin my life. If I can burn the letters, it's the people that's more difficult. What am I supposed to do with a woman and a child? I started to think how I could keep them away from you. I wrote a letter, copying your handwriting and your name just in case. I promised I'd come as soon as I could. You probably don't remember how I persuaded you to move, but you wouldn't agree. So I lived like a volcano. I didn't know how to protect my happiness, how to save it if you found out the truth about your daughter. I didn't take holidays or sick leave with Wilfred at work because of it. Then you realized 5 years later that it's only once a year that woman bothers you. I felt a little better. I burned the letters for a long time, for a few years. Then I felt as if I was ashamed. I started hiding them. I knew there were places in the house you'd never think of going. The only thing was that I couldn't leave my post office because of my fears, and I refused the post at the main post office. But that's all right, I got used to it. How long did I write to you? But I saved only 10 messages with the last letter, which came from Beaverton in 1994, and I did a mean thing. In it, Marion wrote that her health was failing, that she needed medication. And although Cheryl was trying to support her, she was always short of money. Obviously, it was a time when people were scared and unstable. The whole country was in a fever. Marion didn't ask for anything for herself. But of course I couldn't be completely calm. What if she came to our land? What if she decided to see you? I sealed the envelope carefully and returned it with the note the addressee has dropped out. After that, the stream of letters from Marion dried up. I wish I'd done that before. I don't know. It wouldn't have been a problem in the first place. Now I don't know what to do with the letters. In fairness, you should read them, but not while I'm alive. So when you hear the bitter story of Marion and your daughter, I'll be gone. Forgive my selfishness, but I could not have done otherwise. I loved you too much, and I didn't want to leave my son without a father. I don't care anymore. Wilfred's all grown up and my granddaughter's a bride. So the way to Marion is clear. I only ask you to wait at least a year after I'm gone before you look for your first love and a daughter you've never seen. Endure this period of mourning in honor of all that was good between us. And then do what your heart tells you to do. Forgive me for everything. Loving you, Shirley. Sabrina was shocked to read the note. The story of tragic love, years of deception and hard confession touched her. Involuntarily, the girl thought that perhaps Grandma Shirley should have kept her secret forever. And on the other hand, realized that it was too cowardly. Of course, it was easier to judge from the outside than to find oneself in such a stalemate. And Sabrina couldn't imagine what she would have done in her grandmother's shoes. Would she have told her lawful husband that her friend still loved him and was waiting for him, together with their daughter? Or would she have tried to shield him from this literally amazing information by any means imaginable? It was clear to Sabrina what Grandpa Vincent wanted to talk to her about. Surely, as the year's grace period that Grandma Shirley had asked him for was coming to an end, he wanted advice on how to find his long-lost lover. It had been a long time, and it was possible that Marion had long since changed her common surname, Lopez. Her daughter Cheryl, Sabrina, and her father's blood sister could also be married. Trying to distract herself from the unexpected information she had received, Sabrina folded the leaves back into the box and put it in the wardrobe, not daring to read the letters Marian had sent to her grandfather just yet. The girl subconsciously feared that some more details of her loved one's private life might be revealed. Grandpa Vincent was languishing alone, except for the fact that his old dog Buddy was napping next to him. It was boring, so Sabrina started cleaning, though it wasn't really necessary. She took out a bucket of dirty water to splash it in the far corner of the plot, where the rose was still modestly green, but which would be covered with a scattering of golden buds in autumn, and she saw a car pull up to the gate. Sabrina's parents, who had finally returned from abroad, got out of the car, and she was incredibly happy. Even if this meeting was with a touch of bitterness, but at least the excitement for her parents had receded. In the course of a confusing conversation, it became clear that they had traveled to a place where there was no communication or internet access. They had received a sad message from Wilfred and Patricia's daughter when they reached civilization just before Grandpa Vincent's funeral and had hurried back. However, they were still late. Sabrina was relieved that she now had the support she so desperately needed. After hugs and tears, when everyone was already at the table, she began to tell her father and mother about the unusual find. The girl took the box out of the cupboard to prove her words. Together with her parents, she once again read aloud Grandma Shirley's handwritten confession. Then they studied the surviving letters. In one of them was a picture from the photo studio. It showed two pretty girls who looked only remotely like Kansas natives. The two beauties were clearly related in appearance, but they looked more like sisters with a slight age difference. The inscription on the back of the photograph, however, indicated that they were Grandpa Vincent's first love and their mutual daughter Cheryl. In beautiful handwriting it was inscribed, "In memory of my beloved Vincent from Marian and Cheryl on her 16th birthday. We hope to see you again. 1981. Wilfred, forgetting his respectability, even whistled. Yeah, to say I'm surprised is to say nothing at all. How did Mum manage to keep it all a secret and not give away her knowledge for so many years? I have no idea." Patricia, with whom her mother-in-law had a marvelous relationship, was also puzzled. Against all notions of family life, they had had so many heart-to-heart talks. But Shirley had never said a word about the fact that somewhere far away her official husband had a lover and an illegitimate daughter. It wasn't easy to come to terms with such news. Patricia asked, "Wilfred, do you think we should find your sister and her mother? If she's still alive, of course, or should we let things stay as they are?" The man himself didn't know how he should react to what was happening. From what he had learnt from his daughter, his father wanted the secret of his youth to be known. On the other hand, was it ethical to intrude into the fate of a woman who was a stranger, but a blood relative? She appears to be in her late 50s, and this Marian herself is probably in her 70s now. Reminiscing about her difficult youth and the man she once loved so much but never waited for could be detrimental to her health. Plus, as Shirley's grandmother wrote, after she sent the letter marked addressee dropped out back, they stopped coming altogether. That could mean both that Marian believed the lie and that she was desperate. Alas, however, the most unfavorable events in the fate of a woman and her daughter could also have happened. Sabrina said, as if voicing her thoughts aloud. Still, it seems to me that we should at least try to find grandfather's daughter, just to sort of rehabilitate him. After all, it's not Grandpa Vincent's fault that things turned out this way. I think it's only fair that the whole truth be known to Marian, and of course Cheryl. Sabrina said. Listen, Daddy turned the girl to Wilfred. How do you feel knowing you have an older sister, a blood sister? Do you feel like seeing her, socializing with her? The man was confused and asked his daughter himself in response. And you, Sabrina? Cheryl is your aunt, by the way. So you're curious to meet her, then? Sabrina listened to herself and admitted, curious, and a little scared. The family was divided. Patricia, after listening to her husband and daughter, declared, I think we should leave things the way they are. There's no point in disturbing something that has long since healed. More than half a century has passed. Maybe Marian is happy with another man. And here we are greeting, so to speak, relatives. I don't think it's quite right. A long conversation did not help to find a compromise. In addition, all the family members themselves were not sure of the correctness of their thinking. In the end, the Robinsons went to bed so they could visit Vincent's final resting place in the morning. "Sorry I'm late," Papa Wilfred whispered, standing by the freshly wreath-covered mound. "Never realized I wouldn't see you again." The man placed 4 scarlet carnations on the empty spot and bowed his head, hiding his tears. After Wilfred, his daughter-in-law and granddaughter placed flowers on Vincent's grave. Each of the grieving relatives realized that they were subconsciously waiting for a sign of what to do with the information that had come upon them. They did not speak of it aloud, but Wilfred, Patricia, and Sabrina were all waiting for a revelation to come upon them. Perhaps it was naive and foolish, but they wanted to know what Vincent wanted. As much as the Robinsons hoped for a clue, they couldn't get one. It was with heavy hearts that they returned to the flat. They decided that Wilfred would stay in the house for the time being, and his wife and daughter would visit him in their spare time. While Patricia helped her husband to pack at least a minimum of necessary things, Sabrina hurried to the nearest shop to buy for the grieving man some particularly tasty food. She felt sorry for the cat, who seemed to have lost his luster and appetite. After consulting with a serious-looking woman, who gave the trolley bags of wet food, Sabrina gave her grandfather's pet some goodies and returned home, holding out a bag of food to her father. "Man is a little cranky right now and may refuse the food," the girl asked. "Try feeding him from the palm of your hand. He usually starts eating as a sign of respect." Wilfred smiled at his daughter. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. You'll brag about your cat." The days flew by. Sabrina and her mother Patricia went to work, and in the evenings they talked about everything, as the girls had been used to since their early childhood. Of course, they also talked about the secret that Grandma Shirley had kept hidden for so many years. On the 9th day, they decided to hold the wake of Vincent's soul at his house. It seemed like the right thing to do. There seemed to be fewer people than in the cafe after the funeral. But the fact that Patricia had decided to make the cakes herself instead of ordering them from a bakery as a sign of respect for her father-in-law had made Sabrina tired and Sabrina tired and Sabrina tired. But the memorial treats turned out unusually tasty, as if someone from above helped to cook. They sat together heartily, remembering various incidents from the past. Wilfred gently tried to ask his great-uncle, "Michael, is there anything you can tell me about Daddy's youth?" The older man was happy to talk and spoke in a sing-song voice. Vincent was always brave for any good cause, responsive and determined. When he came back from the army, he went to the factory to get a job in the personnel department. As his mother told me later, he heard from someone that young people from our town were going to the Virgin Lands. It was not a novelty then. The film about the dashing guy had already come out, very inspiring, and in general, everything was on the rise. Everyone wanted to help the country. It was a united effort, and Vincent, after returning from compulsory service, decided that he would be more useful there, on the Virgin Lands. I admit, wanted to go with him, but where would I go? I was only 15 years old at the time. Vincent was 5 to 6 years older than me. So he went to Kansas. He learned to drive a truck in the Army and got his license. He came back almost 5 years later. He brought back some seedlings as a memento of his long business trip. Of course, he had changed during this time. He was a naive, idealistic boy. He came back practically a grown man. Not because he was my kin, but to be fair, Vincent had not become worse. You'd be hard-pressed to find a man like that these days. Golden hands and a decent character. They welcomed him here at the car factory with open arms. Non-drinker, hard worker, honest. What else can you ask for? He's greedy for work. And so he'd take off his last shirt and give it to someone else. Oh, the men respected him. He never refused anything they asked him. And women were crazy about him. And he was very respectful to everyone. Then he got married on holidays. She worked at the post office, and one day the company car broke down. Vincent was driving by and couldn't leave his colleague in the lurch. That's how they met. They met briefly and got married. It was a small wedding. My mom even resented it, as if it was a shame. But when you were born, Wilfred, that's when Vincent got excited. There was a big party in the courtyard family, neighbors and colleagues. Everyone was invited. There didn't seem to be any delicacies on the table, but that wasn't the main thing. The atmosphere is much more important, Yes, there was a time when all the neighbors were almost like relatives. Michael interrupted his memories to quench his thirst with a cool, tasty compote. Although there was nothing new he had learnt that the Robinsons didn't know, it was still nice to hear the kind words about Vincent. After Wilfred, Patricia, and Sabrina were the only ones left in the house, the female side of the family cleaned up, leaving the only man, save for the cat, to sort out the makeshift benches. Tired Sabrina went to bed on her favorite cot and had a strange, incredibly realistic dream. The girl was not even frightened when she saw her grandfather Vincent and his favorite Japanese woman. The man stood under the tree, gently stroking the bark and looking at his granddaughter, asking, "As the apples ripen, take a few and give them to those you knew. Don't forget, Sabrina, please don't forget." Grandpa Vincent looked away, as if trying to see what was happening over his granddaughter's shoulder. Sabrina turned around to see what or who the man was interested in, but it was empty. When the girl's gaze returned to the apple tree, the grandfather was no longer under the crown. Outside the window, the wind whistled and birds sang, pulling Sabrina out of her dream, which had left a vivid impression. There was no doubt that Grandpa Vincent had sent word, the sign she needed to make the right decision. Of course, he had made his wish clear. At his request, Sabrina would have to make a trip from the other side of the world in the autumn, so that her grandfather's longtime lover and their common daughter would know the truth. Shocked, Sabrina did not hide from her parents that she had seen Grandpa Vincent in a dream. Wilfred was even a little annoyed that the late Papa had visited his granddaughter, not him, in his dreams. But the wise Patricia supported both husband and daughter. It was the right thing to do. Out there, beyond the realm of reality, there must be rules. On the eve of the holiday, the whole family was busy preparing for Sabrina's upcoming trip. The girl's attempts to find Cheryl on social networks were unsuccessful, although she patiently browsed through hundreds of user pages from all over the world, not just her home state. Sabrina planned to leave on the first day of her holiday, so as not to delay the decision on the issue, which was already delayed for many years by the will of her grandmother Shirley. The girl's parents, trying not to betray their excitement, helped their daughter to pack. They were most responsible for the forthcoming transport of apples, which Sabrina had dreamed her grandfather had ordered her to take with her. Patricia placed a rectangular plastic basket without a handle in a rather compact but capacious gym bag. She carefully stacked the ripe fruit there, laying each layer with parchment paper on her husband's advice, and the main load, carefully covered with a towel, was packed. Sabrina added the minimum number of items to her bag and set off on her journey. At the girl's request, her parents only walked her to the taxi. Although the daughter promised to call and report the results of the search, Patricia and Wilfred were worried about their daughter. It was not at all certain that the search expedition would be a success, and a meeting with a woman from Vincent's past could lead to unpredictable results. Thanks to a carefully planned route and the absence of any unforeseen circumstances, Sabrina had no trouble reaching the town where Vincent's grandfather had received letters for so long, some of which he had been able to read only after his wife's death. The town seemed to her to be a rather cozy settlement. The coming autumn had already touched the trees with gold and made it especially picturesque. Private houses were peacefully neighboring with apartment buildings, near which there were small vegetable gardens and even polycarbonate greenhouses. The girl approached the house whose address was written on the envelope. There was an intercom on the door of the 5-story building, and Sabrina hesitated for a few seconds. Although she had prepared herself morally for the trip, and even prepared a small speech before the difficult explanation, she suddenly became afraid. Overcoming herself, Sabrina dialed the number of the flat she was interested in on the keypad. "Hi. Excuse me, can I speak to Marian Lopez and her daughter Cheryl, please?" she asked, hearing a pleasant female voice coming from the speaker. "Come in," came from the speaker, and the door opened. Sabrina was greatly surprised that the stranger whose voice came from the speaker did not ask her name or the purpose of her visit, but there was no time to ponder. Breathing deeply to calm herself, the girl went up to the first floor, where a not-yet-old woman was waiting for her behind the open door. Shirley gazed at her face, but tried in vain to recognize Cheryl in the stranger, considering that the photograph showed her at the young age of 16. And more than 3 decades had passed, it was unlikely that such a dramatic change had taken place. Outwardly, the woman was of a very different type, and she looked about 40 years old, maybe a little more. How could one tell the age of a modern, self-conscious woman, which the stranger was undoubtedly? Sabrina said a friendly hello. Hello again. I'm the one who bothered you. Could you please tell me how to speak to Marian Lopez? The woman carried on the conversation freely, even friendly, as if she had known Sabrina for years. Hello, if you're not joking. Where are you from? The question surprised Sabrina, but she answered honestly, though she didn't see how it mattered. The woman, hearing the name of the town, softened and invited her into the flat, where she asked another strange question. What are your grandfather's last names? My grandfather's last name on my dad's side is Robinson, and on my mum's side it's Jackson, was a phrase that had a strange effect on the woman. She asked nothing more, fidgeting. In spite of Sabrina's excuses, she led her into the kitchen and moved a plate of delicious, ruddy cakes. She offered tea, coffee, homemade compote, and holding out a glass of the sweet drink to her guest, explained. Marian was my mum's best friend, Cheryl was my nanny and big sister. We survived together, even when there was nothing to eat but potatoes grown in the wasteland. We only saw meat once in a while. When Aunt Marian was planting, she was so worried and afraid, and hoped that one day they'd be looking for her. She told my mum to tell no one how to find her and her daughter, except a man named Robinson or his descendants. She was very fond of one Vincent Robinson. A daughter is a daughter, the fruit of their love sinful and sweet. Yes, that's right, Vincent Robinson is my grandfather, Sabrina confirmed the rejoinder. He was my grandfather. He passed away recently. It was only afterwards that it came to light that he once had his first love and their shared daughter living here in your flat at this very address. It's not Grandpa Vincent's fault he didn't find them sooner. It's just the way things are. The landlady took a notebook out of the cupboard, tore out a piece of paper, took a pen, and flicked through the pages. She began to rewrite something, not forgetting to be cordial. Are you eating? Drink. You came straight here from the railway station, didn't you? Have some refreshment. You'll have to go to Sacramento to meet Marian or Tracy, to meet again. And you didn't move. We had to, even though it was incredibly hard to part with each other. It was almost like we were family. But after Aunt Marian ran into an acquaintance of the man who kept her as cheap labor, I was afraid to stay here. It's easier to get lost in a big city. Here, I wrote down their address and Cheryl's phone number for you to make an appointment. Knowing Aunt Marian, I'm sure she's still waiting to hear from her beloved Vincent. But it's better if you and Cheryl call. Arrange a time and place to meet at their place, not too well in the house. The daughter's husband is a real creep. The first time I saw him, I was scared. A man standing there, smiling at you, but his eyes were contemptuous and evil. As Aunt Charlotte told me later, he helped her daughter a lot when she got a new job in town, and she fell in love without noticing any of his faults. When she did, it was too late, like a fly caught in a spider's web. No matter how hard Aunt Charlotte tries to keep him away from her daughter, she just can't seem to do it. Alice was silent. Apparently she herself was troubled by the situation, but she didn't know how to help the woman she considered practically her sister. Sabrina tried not to look hungry, but she couldn't refuse the tasty treat. She belatedly remembered the rules of etiquette. Excuse me, my name is Sabrina. Thank you so much. Your pies are delicious and your compote is wonderful. The woman was very sweetly embarrassed. Oh, come on, that's good. Alice pounced with questions. My name is Alice. And please don't use you to me, it makes me uncomfortable. By the way, Aunt Marian taught me how to cook. She's really good at cooking. Listen, Sabrina, do you have any money for the journey? The taxi fare will be insane, but it's faster than the train. I'm sorry it's not much, but I can give you 1,030. Sabrina was struck to the core by this offer. Some Alice, a seemingly quite modern young woman, in her simple-minded and open demeanor was like the positive characters from the old films that grandparents loved to watch. Such goodwill made Sabrina's nose pinch, and she hurried to reassure Alice. Don't worry, my finances are fine. Thank you, Alice. I'm very pleased to meet you. Thank you for the treats. It's time to move on. Sabrina looked up the cost of a taxi to her destination on the app and sighed. Yes, you're right. The price is something unbelievable. That's okay. I'll gladly take the electric train. Alice didn't let her guest off that easily. Wait, let's look at the schedule of trains and trains passing by on the internet. Maybe we'll even book a ticket at once. Otherwise, why are you wasting your time in the waiting room? You better keep me company here. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Sabrina nodded, agreeing with Alice's wisdom. But the caution was unnecessary. It turned out that with time to get to the train station, it was almost time to say goodbye to the hospitable woman. Almost out of the flat, Sabrina hesitated briefly. Opening her bag, she pulled out several large, flavorful apples and held them out to Alice. These are apples from Grandpa's garden. They're delicious. I don't know how else to thank you for such a warm welcome. Alice was embarrassed again, but accepted the apples. I can't resist such incredible flavor and beauty. They're just like a picture. Say hi to Cheryl. By the way, with your permission, I think I'll let her know you're going over there. Let her get Aunt Marian ready, or she might have a blood pressure spike or a heart attack or something. Sabrina had no objections, and bidding her new acquaintance a warm farewell, she went to the railway station. She sent her parents a detailed account of how she had been met by the helpful Alice. She told them that Marian and Cheryl had moved, but she had their new address. Her mum, who was clearly worried about her daughter, replied almost instantly and asked her to be careful on the road. The girl light-heartedly promised to look around carefully and not to get involved in any dubious ventures. Fortunately, the atmosphere in the carriage was quite calm. Some of them were gazing thoughtfully out of the window at the scenery, which was becoming less and less recognizable in the darkness. Some of the occasional fellow travelers were dozing, and Sabrina wished she could be as immersed in her smartphone as most of the passengers in the carriage. The charging level made it necessary to refrain from that luxury. Almost at the moment when the departing day crosses the boundary of night to be forever in the past, Sabrina found herself in an ancient town. The girl thought with belated regret that she hadn't realized to take care of booking a hotel room in advance. After all, to appear in Marian's flat at such a late hour was somehow quite awkward. She felt a little uncomfortable, but ordering herself not to be a coward, she quickly, before the smartphone finally ran out of battery, orientated herself how to get to the nearest hotel. Luck favored Sabrina. The receptionist, smiling, even as if sincere, offered a small but, according to her, very cozy room. Sabrina was soon settled into her temporary accommodation, and after putting her smartphone to charge, she showered, had a snack, and lay down on the bed. Although the time was late, the mattress was comfortable and no loud noises penetrated the hotel room. There was no sleep in either eye. Still, in the morning there would be the meeting for which she had traveled. And again there was anxiety. The girl thought for the 100th time what to say to the innocent victim of deception. How to apologize for her grandmother. And in general, in what style to talk. After all, if with good-natured Alice everything somehow turned out to be very easy, it does not mean that communication with Marian and Cheryl will be as pleasant. Although only managing to fall asleep towards morning, Sabrina woke up a few minutes before her alarm clock. The disturbing night, thanks to the girl's youth, had left no noticeable marks on her appearance, and at 10 she ventured to call Cheryl. The woman answered almost instantly. It seemed as if she had been expecting the call. She probably had. After all, it's not often that relatives who didn't know about each other meet. Having quickly arranged to meet at a cafe near the hotel, Cheryl was the first to end the call. Surprisingly, the choice of a neutral public place to meet had finally calmed Sabrina, on whom her recent acquaintance with Alice had made a most pleasant and even reassuring impression. Well, there's just no way such a sweet, kind woman could be friends with and consider bad people her family. So both Marian and Cheryl are at least quite adequate. Besides, in a cafe, surrounded by people, it is unlikely to come to a violent expression of emotion, and there is less risk that Marian will get too nervous. She transferred the basket of apples into the spacious shopping bag she had thoughtfully brought with her and set off. As she approached the cafe, Sabrina spotted a slender woman on the porch of the establishment, whose features looked like the girl from the pictures in Marian's letter. "Hello, Cheryl. I'm Sabrina Robinson. It turns out my grandfather is your daddy," the girl said hello first. The woman smiled. "A pleasure. Completely sincerely speaking. I was told by Alice that she had a wonderful experience, and her judgment, as life has shown, is to be trusted. Come on, I'll introduce you to Mum, and we can have a quiet chat. She is waiting for us inside." The introduction procedure was remarkably smooth. Marian was friendly, but with ill-concealed interest in the face of her favorite man's granddaughter. To somehow break the lingering silence, Sabrina held out a bag to the woman. "These are some apples from Grandpa's garden." Marian pulled away from studying Sabrina's face and looked inside the bag and aghast. "Crazy. This is the real variety." The woman carefully pulled out one fruit, sniffed it, holding it gently as if the apple were a living thing, and without addressing either Sabrina or her daughter, spoke softly. It was noticeable that Marian was anxious to express all the pain she had accumulated. "Vincent and I once dreamed that we would live in a house with an apple tree around it. Not just as a fruit tree, but sort of in honor of me. My full name is Marianne, which means apple blossom. It's such a shame our dreams didn't come true. I was only 15 when we met. In my native land, however, all girls grow up early, ripe for married life with the man they love. Vincent was 9 years older. I wasn't embarrassed by the age difference. I lied to him. I told him I was an adult. He didn't think I was lying. We loved each other, forgetting everything. I guess the higher powers made me pay for my lies and my sin. And this terrible punishment is also reflected on my daughter." The woman stroked her daughter's hand, who blushed like a boiled crayfish and fell silent. Sabrina, who listened to her without interrupting, confessed. "It wasn't a higher power that intervened in your life at all. It's much simpler and more hurtful than that. Grandfather Vincent received some of your letters only after the death of his wife, my grandmother." Sabrina detailed everything she knew herself and, not forgetting to mention her strange dream, summarized. "So I came here to make you all aware. Both my parents and I thought it was the fair thing to do. I'm sorry your love had such a tragic history, but nothing can be undone now." Marian held the apple in one hand, pressing it to her heart with the palm of her hand, the other wiping away the tears that were stubbornly rolling down her cheeks. Neither Cheryl nor Sabrina knew what to say or how to comfort the woman in her grief. There was a silence, like an unspoken moment of silence for Vincent's death. They had not yet ordered drinks and food. Marian, as if waking from a daze, suggested, "My dears, why don't we take a walk down the street? I'm feeling a little short of breath." Sabrina and Cheryl agreed without hesitation, although the look on the waiter's face when he didn't wait for an order, or at least a tip, was simply disgruntled. No one seemed to care about him at all. Three members of the fair sex were pondering the vicissitudes of fate and how outside interference ruins the most wonderful dreams. Her daughter wanted to take the bag of apples, but Marian stopped her. "I'm sorry, but I don't want to part with these apples." The long handles allowed her to hang the bag on her shoulder, so it wasn't too heavy to carry. Marian asked Sabrina to tell her everything she knew about her grandfather, what he did for a living, what he liked to watch, what he liked to wait, other everyday details. The woman seemed to absorb the moments that passed her by and smiled quietly. Perhaps she imagined that she herself had been living next to him all these years. The almost idyllic walk was interrupted by the ringtone of Cheryl's mobile phone. The male caller was shouting so loudly that even from the distance of the alley, Sabrina could hear everything he was saying. "Why the hell aren't you home and at work? I was in a hurry, driving like a madman, and it's like a bad joke. Where are you wandering? If I find out you're cheating on me, I'll kill you, your lover, and your mother. I want you out of my flat." The stately Cheryl seemed to grow smaller as she listened to the tirade. The lights in her eyes went out, and she replied briefly, "I'll be right there." And Marian became visibly agitated. It seemed the voice of the man who had called was familiar to her, and this man did not evoke the slightest positive emotion in her. Cheryl began to say goodbye to Sabrina, and then turned to her mum. "Look, I'm going to run. Marcus seems pissed off already. You two talk some more. There's probably a lot of things you'd like to talk about." Cheryl hurried away, and from that moment the ease of Marian and Sabrina's conversation seemed to evaporate. The girl understood that the woman was terribly afraid for her daughter, who, as it was easy to understand, was in a relationship with a real tyrant. Soon Marian confirmed her young companion's conjecture. "I have the impression that my daughter is continuing my bitter story of slavery at the mercy of a cruel, overbearing man. However, unlike me, she got married officially, and with great love. At least 15 years ago it seemed that way. I was so happy for my daughter. Marcus always treated me and Cheryl with respect. But as soon as he could talk me into adding my savings to the shared flat, things started to go sour. One thing didn't suit him, then another. While I was living separately in a rented room from my daughter and son-in-law, and did not realize how everything really was. Then, 5 years ago, I got seriously ill and went on a long sick leave. My employer laid me off, so I had to ask Marcus to move into their one-bedroom flat. I felt I had a moral right to do so, but of course it was awkward. I hid my pride and asked to stay with my daughter and Marcus. That's when I realized they weren't doing well. There was always some sort of grudge against my daughter. Jealousy, hurtful words. In a milder form than I'd been subjected to in the past. But every accusation against Cheryl was a punishment. Recently, he's been harping on my infertility, even though he's always said that his back is interfering with our life plans. I get the impression he's provoking Cheryl into divorce, and then we'll end up with some kind of cubbyhole when we share the flat. I realize now that Marcus is going to divide everything down to the last spoonful. That she and I will be like two blades of grass that can't be broken. I don't have a law degree. Cheryl's a long way from it either. We can't financially afford a good lawyer. Sabrina didn't know how to console the unfortunate woman who had never in her life been able to lean on a man's reliable shoulder instead of throwing herself into the fray on her own. Alice's friendship with her mum seemed to be the only bright spot in her fate. It was not easy, but when the problems try to solve not one person, already at least morally easier. And Marion confessed. As soon as I lost my full-time job and started baking at home, the delicate balance collapsed. Everything went downhill somehow. Although the standard of living even seemed to have improved. I could probably pay my rent again. But it's ironic. I'm just afraid for my daughter's health. Oh, I'm so afraid Marcus is going to start laying hands on Cheryl. And right now my heart is restless, like some kind of trouble is coming. Sabrina, I hate to drag you into our family squabbles, but come to our place, please. Marcus needs to tone down his arrogance in front of you. That's what he always does in front of strangers. He behaves enthusiastically and even self-consciously, playing the role of a model husband. If you ask our neighbors, they'd probably all agree that my Cheryl is incredibly lucky to have him. Sabrina immediately agreed to keep Marion company. Soon, after a few bus stops and a short walk down the street, they were inside the flat. A muffled male voice could be heard coming from one of the rooms. Now I'm going to teach you how a husband should be greeted, because you need to put the idea in ditches like you not to twist your tail in the absence of your lawful spouse. Marion opened the door and saw Marcus grab Cheryl by the neck, lifting her off the floor in a state of some irrational anger. The woman took the bag of apples off her shoulder and knocked her son-in-law on the head. The man, never letting go of his victim, slumped to the floor. Cheryl wheezed from coughing. "Mom, what are you doing? What fly bit you? What if you fractured Marcus's skull?" The woman slowly walked over to the couch, sat down on it, and asked, "Cheryl, nothing will happen to Marcus. You better get me some water and a sedative. Drops my heart starting to pound." Sabrina, meanwhile, was looking closely at the man. He was clearly stunned, but not too badly, and was already making attempts to get up. He had a dazed look on his face. Marcus was in no hurry to get up and rubbing the back of his head. He looked angrily at Marion and threatened. "Don't even think you're going to get away with this. I'll go to the trauma center, get the beatings taken out, and put you senile old woman, behind bars." Cheryl's hands shook as she handed the cup of medicine to her mum. The woman began to urge Marcus to take it easy, but he only became more vocal and threatening. "You'll go to your death, and then you'll die in the state house. And with your health there is nothing to be there. A woman, as they say, is easier on the horse than on the mare." Unexpectedly, Marcus' tirade was interrupted by Sabrina, who, together with her grandfather and father, had watched various detective shows and had little but valuable experience in calming down even the most inadequate visitors and suppliers. "First of all, I'm calling the police here right now. I saw you trying to hurt Cheryl with my own eyes. So Marion's actions may well be classified as grievous bodily harm in self-defense." Sabrina couldn't understand how she'd had the audacity to call a grown man some criminal code numbers from the depths of her subconscious. Probably the stress had taken its toll. She was so dashingly inserting phrases from her head, some legal terms, that Marcus, under the fierce pressure of the stranger, visibly staggered, and then, carefully rising, left the room, throwing his wife. "You are lucky I have a strong head, or you would have been a widow." When the man left, Sabrina took a seat on the couch next to Marion. The woman began to apologize to her guest. "I'm sorry, Sabrina, for what happened." Inside, though, the girl was all shaking with anger. She managed an almost calm reply. "Nothing to apologize for at all, Cheryl." Cheryl stood against the wall and listened to what was going on in the kitchen, where Marcus had gone. Then she rushed in, much to the surprise of her mom and Sabrina. The man was climbing the cupboards in a fit of rage, throwing everything out of them onto the floor. Marion quietly called out to her son-in-law, "Marcus, be quiet. I hid my stash a long time ago. As soon as I noticed that the notes started to disappear from it. You won't find anything in the kitchen. Don't get your hopes up." The man was crushing groats and pasta with his feet, not knowing where he was stepping. He walked out of the kitchen, nearly knocking down Cheryl, who was in his way, and soon slammed the door loudly. Marion and Cheryl began to clean up Marcus's mess, and Sabrina joined them without hesitation. To the objections of her hosts, the girl confessed. "I feel partly a little guilty for everything that has happened, so of course I won't stand aside." The mess in the kitchen was almost cleared up when Marcus appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a man in a police uniform. "Hello, Lieutenant Norman Morris, Precinct Commander. Marcus asked me here to look into the circumstances of the battery." Marion sank into a chair in exhaustion. Cheryl glared angrily at her husband, who, on the contrary, was cheering. While the women were cleaning up, he had hustled over and literally dragged the law enforcement officers into the flat, greatly exaggerating the extent of the conflict. Sabrina slumped against the wall at Marcus's insolence and blurted out to eliminate the possibility of a trick from this man with a rotten, petty soul. "Excuse me, Norman, may I see your ID?" The lieutenant produced the ID and began his questioning. As Marion began to recount what had happened, Sabrina asked permission to make a phone call. Morris did not interfere, and the girl hurriedly dialed her father's number. Wilfred listened to his daughter without interrupting, and then said, "In general, now Oliver will call you back. He is well versed in such matters. You put the phone on speaker and I think he'll be able to resolve the situation favorably and without hassle." Sabrina's father wasn't wrong. Marcus's look of triumph melted as the policeman, who had seen the red fingerprints on Cheryl's neck during the phone call, began to cast disapproving glances at his insolent husband. The lawyer insisted that the lieutenant also take a statement from the woman who had been assaulted by her husband, and this speech had a marvelous effect. After the mutually amiable conclusion of the telephone conversations, Morris asked Marcus sternly, "Do you still claim that your mother-in-law hit you with a heavy bag? Out of the blue? The picture of this incident is quite different. You, Marcus, practically made a false call and lied about it. Unfortunately, it's not a prosecutable offense, but you could get a fine. I'm going to write down everything as it happened, and I'm warning you at once, don't lie to me again." When Marion showed her terrible weapon, with which she had hit her son-in-law on the head, the policeman could hardly contain a smile and involuntarily admired the large apples. Marcus, having read and signed the document, cursed and swore at his wife, her mum, and their inexplicable young protector. The police officer reprimanded the man, and he left the flat in a rage. Norman turned to Cheryl and said, "I will advise you now, not as a neighborhood officer, but just as a human being, do not tolerate such an attitude. Further, as experience shows, such marriages do not lead to anything good. Divorce before it's too late." Cheryl thanked the precinct. "Thank you, Norman, for your informal approach. You've dealt with the situation fairly." Marion put almost half of the apples Sabrina had brought in a bag and handed it to the police officer with the words, "Please take this as a token of appreciation. I am very sorry that my intemperance caused my son-in-law to disturb you." The policeman shrugged his shoulders, saying it was his job, and then, as if shedding the veneer of officialism, asked with admiration in his voice, "How did you manage to grow such beautiful apples? At my parents' dacha this year, almost the entire crop at the stage of wilting hail beaten. What is not beaten, then during the frost rotted? Marian smiled. I did not hope to admire such apples myself. It's the famous real variety. These apples were generously brought to us by Sabrina, our volunteer advocate, from another state, where a good man had brought a seedling from another country many years ago. Despite the difference in climate, the tree took root. The neighborhood officer thanked me again for the apples. Just in case, he dictated his phone number and left the flat after saying goodbye. In spite of the happy resolution of the problem, Marcus's petty revenge in the form of calling the police was a rather exhausting event for everyone. Marian jokingly declared, "That's enough cleaning for today. Where have you seen this? She comes to visit us and we give her a broom and dustpan. Basta, girls, let's take a break. Let's close the table in my room. This situation is making us hungry." Sabrina was removed from the party preparations and hurried to call her father to tell him that the conversation with the lawyer had helped her out of a very difficult situation. Wilfred and Patricia, who knew from her husband a slightly different version of events, were relieved when their daughter told them. Even at the age of 24, Sabrina was still the same favorite little girl for her parents, whom they wanted to protect, to cover with their care like a dome, impenetrable to any evil. As Alice had said, Marian was an incredibly skillful cook. Sabrina enjoyed the seemingly simple but delicious dishes. After tea with amazing homemade sweets, Cheryl asked her guest, "Can we have a Skype video call with your dad? I would at least like to meet my only sibling remotely that way." Sabrina confessed, "My parents asked me that too, but I didn't know how to suggest it. Is it convenient?" Marian splashed her hands. "My clever girl, what a good idea you have. Hurry up and get everything set up." Just a few minutes later, Wilfred's image appeared on the laptop screen. First of all, the man began to apologize to Marian. "It's hard for me to say this, but the happiness of my parents' family and my own carefree childhood was actually built on a foundation of your misfortunes. Most likely, if the letters from you had reached my father earlier, he would have found a way to help you. However, my mother was probably afraid that he would leave everything and ask for a divorce, and go to you and the daughter he never got to meet. I sincerely apologize to you, Marian. I want you to know that you can always count on me. Sabrina will leave you my phone number and other contacts. Feel free to contact me anytime you need me." Sabrina stayed with her hospitable hosts into the evening, listening to Marian and Cheryl talk about herself and her family. Despite the rather odd circumstances of their acquaintance, neither felt the slightest bit awkward. Cheryl confessed, "I had no idea I'd suddenly have such a wonderful niece." As Marian watched Sabrina, she saw a subtle, almost imperceptible resemblance to Vincent's similar facial features. The dimples that appeared when she smiled, the funny habit of wrinkling her nose and frowning her eyebrows. For so many years, the woman remembered the one man she loved desperately. And then, as if out of habit, hoped for a meeting. And now there was no chance of seeing him again. It was incredibly sad. And the only consolation was that Vincent had not forgotten or betrayed her. He had naively believed what she had said. That was the only thing she could reproach him for if she wanted to. Countless times Marian had imagined that she had misconducted that fatal conversation. If only then, more than half a century ago, she had had the courage to tell her lover that his father was threatening to do away with him if she had offered to run away. Vincent would probably have found a better way of dealing with the problem, though. If only she had told him honestly years ago. They'd probably be together now, just as they'd dreamed. Maybe things would have turned out better for Cheryl, who would have felt her father's care and support in her personal life. Marian was incredibly sorry that she had failed to protect the fragile love. But she could not blame the woman who had become Vincent's lawfully wedded wife. After all, it was she, Marian, who had rejected the man she loved, even under duress. So there was no need to look for fault on the other side. It had been a long, eventful day, and after a long meal and much conversation, the table began to yawn, one at a time or all at once. Sabrina flatly refused to be escorted back to the hotel. "Don't worry, please. The taxi will take me directly to the place, so there won't be any complications. As soon as I'm in my room, I'll let you know." Marion and Cheryl said goodbye to Sabrina as a close relative, with whom not only blood ties but also friendship. Before getting into the taxi, the girl waved to her new acquaintances, looking out of the window, and did not notice how from the bench at the neighboring entrance, Marcus, filled with anger, was watching her. The man thought that this strange young upstart, whom he had seen for the first time in his life today, was to blame for the bad day. Come to think of it, he'd taken a slight hit, and Cheryl had been so over it that she'd left the house and hadn't even thought to put him on notice. Clearly the matter was unclean. He, as a husband, had every right to teach her how a decent woman should behave. But this girl, instead of apologizing, started arguing with him, explaining that she had done nothing wrong. So he cut off her breathing a little, so that she would not be punished. And then the angry fury came in at the wrong time and hit him on the head with all her might. Marcus rubbed the back of his head, feeling the painful bump, and continued to think about the hurt he'd suffered. It probably wouldn't have turned out so well for his wife and her mum if it hadn't been for the unfamiliar face. She'd been the devil to show up at their flat today. The man was sure that without the support of this educated wretch, they wouldn't have dared to make a peep in his direction. Not only that, but he would have been able to convince the police officer that the women were conspiring against him. Only this young sheep Sabrina, as it was written in the report of the district officer, had a trump card. After the intervention of an obviously competent and knowledgeable lawyer, he, Marcus, had to leave the flat with nothing, although he also had the right to the living space. However, the fight for her still ahead. In the meantime, we have to deal with these insolent women. It's useless to break in now to his wife and her mum. They're probably locked up with all the locks and chains. But it's the right thing to do to catch up and teach the runaway a lesson. Marcus sat on the bench like a predator in ambush, watching for the defenseless sheep to leave the flock and be at his mercy. The man even chuckled, glad to find such a comparison. But the wait was prolonged. The autumn evening, gentle and merciless, already hinted that the planned hunt would not take place. Marcus was shivering, whether from restrained rage or from hunger and cold, and was about to leave. But then the door opened, and a fugitive jumped out into the street. Marcus' joy was a little premature, for the insolent sheep had got into a taxi. But that only made the man more excited. The chase was on. Luckily, the cars were side by side. In the meantime, the city's heavy traffic would keep the would-be victim out of sight. Sabrina was already gripping the front door handle of the hotel, wishing she could collapse on the bed and get some sleep. But she heard a voice behind her. Sabrina, or should it be Bizarre? The girl automatically turned around and lost precious fractions of a second. Marcus, whose voice she recognized perfectly well, was rapidly approaching her. Sabrina turned away and, trying to get into the hotel faster, started pushing the doors the wrong way out of fright. When at last rescue was at hand, the man grabbed her by the waist, turned her round to face him, and threatened her in a feignedly affectionate tone. "Where are you going in such a hurry? Let's have a chat, shall we? Explain to me, why the hell are you meddling in my family life? Why don't you say anything, you sheep? How long has it been since you got punched in the face for your big mouth? Who asked you to interfere?" The girl prepared to shout loudly and thought about how to get free. But she didn't have to look for rescue on her own. She couldn't see how the policeman, who was already in civilian clothes, came out of the ajar door behind her back, but she was incredibly happy when she heard. "Marcus, you're absolutely wrong right now. Let the girl go." Marcus instantly loosened his grip and started to justify himself to the policeman. "Norman, I just came to talk to you. Then I wanted to take you for a walk to show you the city." As the policeman left the hotel, he asked, "Sabrina, if you wouldn't mind waiting for me in the lobby. I have something to arrange with Marcus." Sabrina sat down in a comfortable chair. A few minutes later, the police officer sat down next to her and confessed. "You know, I actually came to see you. When my parents saw the apples, they were so distraught. They asked me to arrange with you for a cuttings from this tree. My father wants to graft cuttings and try to grow such beauty too. I can't count the number of times they cheated me with varieties in the markets. On the picture one thing, but grows completely different. So I came here to the hotel, and as it turns out, not for nothing." The girl smiled. She liked this young and very correct and principled policeman. In gratitude for her rescue, she promised to send him as many cuttings as he wanted when she got to her grandfather's cottage. Sabrina and Norman, who asked to address him simply, without middle names, exchanged contacts and said goodbye. The man did not want to part with the charming girl, but he could not find any reason to stay with her. Sabrina thought, I guess there's a reason Grandpa Vincent sent me to find Marion and Cheryl in my dreams. He also told me to bring apples with me. Events after meeting the relatives began to develop with frightening speed. Cheryl divorced from Marcus, and since in Sacramento they and Marion practically nothing held, after the exchange of the flat they moved at Wilfred's invitation to his father's house. The man offered wholeheartedly, Since I am aware of my mother's guilt, let this house be at least a small compensation for all your suffering. Marion sat at length by the apple tree, carefully nurtured by her lover, stroking it like a living thing. Sabrina, who was always a welcome guest, was glad that the old woman had found peace, albeit belatedly. In Vincent's granddaughter's personal life, the sweet fruit of the apple tree also played an important role. Correspondence and regular telephone conversations with Norman made it clear that their affection was mutual, and that it was growing stronger with time. Soon the lieutenant moved to the city to his favorite girl, explaining, Well, why, policemen are needed everywhere, and if necessary I can learn another profession. Cheryl also found her own personal happiness, having met the brother of Aunt Charlotte's neighbor. Marion stroked the apple tree and whispered softly, Thank you, Vincent. I know for a fact that it was you who helped to organize everything so well.